The guy was reading a book with pleasure, looking at the delightful girls. He lived in a men's dormitory. Hiding under the blanket with a book, he sighed sadly, wondering if there really were such girls somewhere. One of the guys shouted to Lee, "Stop reading already! Everyone has to get up early tomorrow. It's time to sleep." The guy yawned in response. La sighed and lay down on the book. He himself was already passing out from fatigue. The guy instantly fell asleep. Although the Wang family was not rich, they still had 3 servants and they lived a very carefree life. But that day, it was the head of the Jiang family's birthday, and a big feast was held. The slaves of the Jiang family entertained the rich and discerning guests of the head of an influential clan. One of the guests asked Wang Huang if he had heard that he was going to sell a couple of his pretty slave girls. Huang sighed. It was because their oxen and donkeys at the mill were getting old, so they needed to buy some male slaves. The guy laughed. Their male slaves work at the mill no worse than cattle, and they even understand commands. He promised Van to come to his house and look at his slaves whom he wanted to sell. One of the priestesses of love asked the master to buy her too. "They say he treats slaves very well," she whispered. "Please put in a few good words for this slave to Headmaster Zhang. She really wants to become a servant." The young master laughed. Did she really think that this was enough to become a slave in the Zhang family? The guy extended his hand and invited her to look at the beauty descending the stairs. The guests laughed. If the slaves could teach the pig to climb trees, then they would give them human status. Wang asked, "Mr. Zhang is throwing a party in honor of his birthday, but why is young Mr. Zhang not visible?" The guy replied, "Didn't Wang hear that young Master Zhang has his eye on a slave from the Wang family and is trying to buy her out?" In the guy's opinion, for that demonic slave to become young Master Zhang's property would be good luck for 8 generations to come. Early in the morning, a very rich guest came to Li's poor village house. He offered Mr. Li money for his slave and 2 more slaves as a gift. Li barked at him to stop talking nonsense. Did he really think Li needed money? Or that he had never seen money before? The guest offered to give him 3 slaves. They are first class. You can do anything with them. They are even more obedient than dogs. And Li's slave looks very stubborn. Where is there anything of a slave in her? He will help Li train her. Li Yuanyi turned to the slave girl standing next to him and made a cruel face. He roughly took the beautiful face of the enslaved demoness and pulled it towards him. Yuanyi asked if she was being stubborn. The girl stubbornly snorted, trying to tear her face away. The owner threw her to the ground and rudely asked how she dared to be stubborn in front of him. Li declared that even if he were given 10 slaves, he would not give this one up. What belonged to him would remain his. The guest asked Yuan Yi with a grin if he really had feelings for his slave. There was no point in being a laughingstock. Li Yuanyi clenched his fist, trying not to reveal his true feelings towards his slave. The buyer said that Yuan Yi was as stubborn as his father, who had brought their family into decline, and that the boy should take the gold. He leaned towards Yuan Yi and whispered that in the area he could turn everything upside down with one wave of his hand. Here, he decides everything. And he's not at all opposed to his father dealing with the stubborn Li family once again. The threat enraged Yuan Yi. He shouted that he didn't care about him. Just let him come here. But at that moment, the buyer's servant hit Li Yuanyi on the back of the head with a board, and the boy flinched. Li Yuanyi staggered and fell to the floor of his own house, losing consciousness. The slave looked silently and fearfully at her lifeless master. Now there was no one to stand up for her. The servant told the young master that things were bad. The master of the house was not breathing. It seemed he had overdone it with the blow. The guest cursed. Well, if he didn't want it the easy way, he'll have it the hard way. We can consider that Yuan Yi was sent to reunite with his family. He looked at the girl and ordered that this demoness be tied to a horse and put on display as a disgrace to the public. The guest decided to say that her demonic essence suddenly broke through and she allegedly killed her master. Today, the Jiang family will burn this creature. The girl screams that she did not do it and demanded to let her go. The student slept restlessly on his dorm bed, his body shaking. Suddenly, the book Li was reading before going to bed opened itself, and an unusual glow began to emanate from it. Li tossed and turned in bed, snoring and sighing, while the system made corrections to the plot. The action of the novel took place in ancient ruins. The young masters dragged the slave Yuan Yi with laughter, saying that she was trembling all over, Everyone wanted to touch her. Greedy male hands reached out to the girl. Everyone laughingly wanted to be the first to touch the obstinate slave. She screamed loudly for them not to touch her. This scream woke up Li Yuanyi. He jumped up on the floor and asked who was shouting and what was going on here. The guy immediately grabbed his head. It hurt terribly. Looking around, the student could not understand where he was. He heard men swearing. Some thought the girl was already dead. She had bitten someone. Many were calling for her to be killed. Li looked around the room in confusion. He was still half asleep and had trouble thinking. Or maybe he was still asleep. Opening the door, the guy went outside and loudly asked what was going on here, what that noise was. The man dragged the girl along the ground and shouted at her that she was just a slave, a cunning wretch. No wonder Li Yuanyi couldn't stand her. The girls smirked. Li Yuanyi was a real character. They treated this slave worse than cattle. Anyone would have gone crazy after that. Li couldn't believe he was inside a novel. And the girl who was being beaten, the slave Ku Sui, was one of the main characters. The guy skipped classes, pretended to be sick, and read this for 3 days in a row, and ended up seeing the plot in the book in a dream. He noticed that Ku Sui was actually even more beautiful than he had imagined. Then a girl from the Wolf Tribe village approached him and asked if Li Yuanyi had woken up. The guy was horrified. That's how he became that worthless scum. But how did it happen? She handed Yuanyi a bat and told him to grab the stick quickly. They caught his runaway slave for him. Now it's his turn to punish her for attacking him. Li couldn't understand anything. This character, who he turned out to be, lived in the novel for only 3 days. He looked questioningly to the side, and we heard some suspicious noise. A golden beam and a strange robot-like creature appeared next to him, introducing itself as Dudin. He greeted Li and said that he was his system in the world of the novel Villainous Without Me, and was ready to begin the story support. The plot has already been set in motion, and the guy has become that same Liu Yuanyi, the cannon fodder from the novel, whose goal is to rehabilitate all the villains. Li shook his head and told Dudin that this was nonsense. Why should he re-educate them? He warned that there was no time to explain now. As soon as the villainous's obsession level reached 5 stars, Li would die instantly. The first villain's obsession is rapidly growing, and if action is not taken now, Li will soon die. One of the slave owners asked Li Yuanyi why he was frozen. Now he would show him how it was done. He hit the demoness on the head with all his might. The girl clenched her teeth and let out a quiet yelp. The guy grabbed a bat and shouted at his neighbor, asking what he was doing, why he was beating her. The slave owner was stunned by what suddenly happened to Yuanyi. He apparently hit his head hard, and he covered the slave with his body and shouted that he would not allow anyone to hurt the girl. The girl who was watching this scene sighed in surprise. She wondered in confusion if Li had really decided to protect Ku Sui. Dudin reported that it was bad. The level of obsession was growing at a furious rate. The guy asked, he was protecting her. Why was the level growing? And then Li realized what an idiot he was. He had possessed Ku Sui's main enemy. Now he is a scoundrel who has been torturing her for years. He cannot suddenly become kind. Anyone will think that he is cooking something even worse. This means that the hero's behavior strategy needs to be changed urgently. He growled that he would deal with his woman himself. What the hell were they? Freaks bothering about. Let them go to hell. Everyone began to disperse. They were sure that this slave would now have to pay for her actions. And Li shouted menacingly for everyone to stay away from her. Alive or dead, she belonged to him. Whoever tried to get near her would die immediately. Ku Sui looked at her tormentor with hatred and silence. After making sure everyone had left, Li turned to the frightened slave and glared at her. The girl was trembling with fear. She didn't know what kind of torture her evil master would come up with this time. He barked at the slave to hurry up and drag her ass home. Dudin smiled. The degree of obsession stopped. Li shouted menacingly, asking what she was doing there, or if she thought he had too much patience. The girl squeezed the sharp stone in her hands until it bled, which she wanted to use to cut the ropes. She looked with hatred at the cruel, boorish man who was her rightful master. One of the girls watched with interest Li Yuanyi and his little slave girl, who was beaten half to death. She chuckled thoughtfully. And this Li Yuanyi turns out to be quite an interesting guy. Ku Sui could barely walk after being wounded. and the owner growled angrily at her to move faster. As if she wasted time, he would break her legs. The beaten girl sobbed and sighed softly, tears streaming down her face. And then her strength left her. Her legs gave way, and she fell to the ground. Li Yuanyi turned around in surprise and saw that his slave had fallen unconscious onto the pavement. He tried to call out to the pathetic slave, but she did not answer. Consciousness had left her. The guy smiled. Well, then her master will have to save her. Li brought the girl home and laid her on the bed. He asked Dudan if he wasn't entitled to some kind of beginner's kit. He explained that the owner had 10 starting points, which could be used to buy a gift in the store, which Li wanted to buy. The guy thought, isn't 10 points too little to start with? They could have given him some bonuses for buying this book. Li looked into the store. It was obvious that he couldn't buy expensive things now. Then she'll take a cute little women's outfit for just 2 points. Let's assume that Li is apologizing to Ku Sui for her previous master. The guy was worried why she still hadn't woken up. She had been sleeping for 3 days already. At that moment, the girl moved. Dudan cried out. She woke up. The slave wiped away the tears that had welled up in her eyes. Li mentally sighed with relief and smiled. She had finally woken up. The guy handed her a bowl, saying that he had just brewed it for her so she should drink it quickly. The girl jumped to the side. Dudan exclaimed, "This is bad. The level of obsession is growing." She probably thought that the owner wanted to poison her. Doubting asked Li Yuanyi not to break character. The guy quickly readjusted himself and made an angry face. He growled at the slave that he didn't care whether she wanted it or not. She needed to drink. He didn't want anyone to die in his house. So let her drink. Li handed her a bowl and threatened that she would pay with her life, would not drink, and would live in his yard. The girl took the bowl and quickly drank everything that was poured into it. She asked Li what other tricks he had, so he shouldn't be shy. The guy felt a pain in his head again. This time, Ku Sui lost consciousness from the beatings of people. She was sure that when Li Yuanyi came to her senses, she would definitely not survive. And all because the girl's strength is now limited. She thought that maybe it would be better to finish everything herself. Li asked menacingly what it meant to finish everything herself. She could forget about it. If she died, he would be to blame for it. He threw her a new dress and placed a hearty meal of soup and rice in front of her. The master said, "Clothes are given to her to wear, and food is given to her to eat. She is grateful to her master, isn't she?" The magical snake hissed. It seemed that Li Yuanyi was as angry as always. Apparently, nothing had changed. The snake once again turned into the girl who had noticed Li Yuanyi the day before. She was perplexed, because she definitely felt as if he had become a different person that day. The girl decided, okay, as long as he was still making fun of Ku Sui, she still had a chance. The girls called out to Jen Yi, inviting her to go pick fruit together. She flashed her green eyes cheerfully and replied, "Of course." She would join them now. Li told the slave that she was only worthy of eating this. Even when he was raising a dog as a child, she had 4 different dishes. He noticed her outfit, which would make people think that Li was indiscriminate in taking slaves, as if even a garbage woman would suit him. The guy ordered her to quickly change her clothes and not embarrass him, and that she should eat everything, leaving at least a piece he would pour it on her head. The level of obsession increased. Li was taken aback. It was impossible to be strict with her either. And why was it so difficult to satisfy her? Duden replied, "Li is not cruel enough like the previous owner," the guy said. "Wow, there is even a chicken leg in the soup." He didn't even notice. He brought the meat to his mouth and asked if the slave really deserved this. It was delicious. But the sight of Sui made him feel sick and he lost his appetite. The guy shouted that he didn't want to see her anymore and ran out, slamming the door. Ku Sui looked at her master with confusion. Something was wrong with him. Left alone, she quickly rushed to the food left for her. The ever-hungry girl grabbed a chicken leg and sank her teeth into it. She really hadn't eaten such a delicious treat in a long time. There was silence in the room. The only sound that could be heard was the girl eating a chicken leg with gusto. As soon as the meat was eaten, Ku Sui sobbed and cried. She could not understand what was wrong with her and why the master fed her. The unfortunate slave wiped away the tears that had welled up in her eyes and sobbed. Her life was very hard. Duda showed the owner what was happening to the girl. Li sighed. The system assistant congratulated the owner. Ku Sui's obsession level decreased for the first time. The guy looked at the demoness and didn't understand. She was such a beautiful girl. How could this freak treat her so cruelly? Lee glanced at his reflection in the water's surface and wondered why he couldn't see his reflection. Duden explained that Lee didn't remember Yuan Yi as a character, so he couldn't see his reflection. In the novel, Lee's character barely washed himself, and the guy said he gave up and would spend 1 point to buy shower gel. Duden announced that when you buy shower gel, you now get a towel and washcloth as a gift. The guy told the assistant that he saw a medical kit on sale for 1 point, so he should take that too. The assistant informed Lee that all items purchased from the store were available for permanent use. Lee smiled and exclaimed that it was a wonderful system. The guy asked Duden if she thought she had already eaten. The system assistant noted that half an hour had already passed. Lee decided that she should have eaten by now and roughly kicked open the door to the room. Ku Sui shuddered and looked up at her master with frightened eyes. She was still eating rice from a bowl. Lee asked Dudong why she hadn't eaten yet, and he apologized and explained that she was injured and it was uncomfortable for her to eat. Yuan Shi growled at the slave to continue eating and stop digging. He gave her a wry smile and reminded her that if even the tiniest crumb remained, she would regret it. Coming closer, he hissed angrily. She remembers how this will end for her. The girl glanced fearfully at her tormentor. She didn't want to tempt fate. Lee glanced furtively at the beauty, despite the pain. She was quickly finishing the rest of the rice from the cup. After making sure that Sui had eaten almost everything, the guy tried to discreetly take the medicine out of his pocket. The girl turned around and thought that it seemed he had come up with another way to mock her. He pulled her hair and treated the wound. Tears welled up in Sui's eyes. She decided that the owner was trying to poison her. Lee asked the slave with a grin if it hurt her. Everything was right. It should hurt her. He did not explain that it was disinfection. He ordered her to continue eating and not stop. The girl bit her fist to keep from screaming in pain. The guy told her to raise her injured arm. Each of her wounds should feel pain after being treated with alcohol. Finally, the food bowls were empty. Ku Sui had eaten her fill, and all her wounds were treated. Lee said, "The medicine has been applied. It's time for him to go." The girl was stunned. That's how he applied the medicine. She turned to her owner in surprise. What he had treated her with was medicine, not poison. The slave tried to stop Yuan Yi, but he had already slammed the door. The girl muttered in surprise, "Isn't this his room?" The guy settled down for the night in a cold room. He had already cooled down and started sneezing. Shivering from the cold, he asked why it was so cold at night. Well, he only had to endure it for 1 night. Lee was sure that when Sui saw in the morning that the wounds had healed, she would understand that he had helped her, and then the level of obsession would decrease. Duden said the point system is divided into 2 metrics, obsession level and favor level. He reminded Lee that he only had 6 points left, but the boy hoped that Ku Sui would bring him points tomorrow. In the morning, the guy was beside himself. He was so hoping that after good treatment and help, Sui's level of favor would rise. He yelled that she was ungrateful. It was illogical. He did so much for her yesterday, but didn't get a single point. The assistant tried to calm the owner down. He had made significant progress over the past few days, but not all at once. And then Lee sniffed. He cursed. He smelled so bad. Yes, the old Yuan Yi was a real slob. His clothes were all stinking. No wonder his glasses weren't growing. He asked Duden if he were Sui. Seeing a shining boy who was gentle and caring, wouldn't his heart tremble? Lee took off Yuan Yi's dirty clothes and quickly washed them. Having finished, he exclaimed, "Now it's time to wash." The assistant moved the washing products to the owner for 1 point. Having finished his hygiene procedures, the guy carefully opened the door to his own house. To avoid scaring the girl, Lee entered very carefully. Finally, he appeared on the threshold, all shining and emitting a pleasant aroma, and with a smile said hello to the slave. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. Not understanding who it was, she shuddered and asked the man who entered who he was. The guy asked with a smile. "Well, it's impressive, isn't it?" Sui became wary. Lee angrily asked why she had left. Duden exclaimed, "This is bad. The level of obsession is growing again." Lee was amazed. He had washed himself. Why was everything getting worse? The assistant was shouting for the owner to come up with something urgently. The guy thought, Well, yes, there is logic in her behavior, which means there is no other way out. He slammed the door and shouted at the slave, asking why she was still wearing those torn rags. Didn't he give her new clothes? Or does she disdain the clothes he gave her? He talks to her, and she has such a sour face. Is she deliberately doing everything in defiance? Does she want to disgrace the Lee family? The girl froze in horror. The guy carefully tugged her by the shoulder. Kyusue's whole body was shaking, and Lee thought that her PTSD was too severe. The girl looked warily at the owner, and he yelled, "Why was she staring at him? Quickly change clothes." The slave shuddered. She muttered that she needed to go cook already. Lee countered that with her cooking skills, even a dog would puke from her food. The owner threw her away and said that she would not cook today. She should stay home and think about her behavior. An enraged Lee ran out of the room. He was practically selling his looks and didn't even gain a little sympathy. Surprised, Chu Sui looked out from behind the door as her master left. She turned around and silently looked at the new, beautiful dress that had been given to her. Episodes where Lee had protected her from other people came to mind. And then he made her a healing potion. Even though she was a slave who abandoned her master in trouble and ran away, she could be returned to the cellar, where she would be beaten to death. But the owner not only did not kill her, but also gave her good clothes. She looked at his hand and wondered if he really cared about her. Even the wounds looked better than yesterday. But the inner demon screamed, "Do you really think that the one who beat you every morning, if he didn't hit you today, it means he cares?" Sui slapped her cheeks. "This is impossible. No one changes like that. All the people from the Lee family have always been bad." She held the new dress in her hands and thought, there is no way she can trust him. Li Yuanyi stopped. He wanted to give the girl time to change her clothes. He asked the assistant, "She is a girl. She will change into a beautiful dress and her sympathy will surely increase." But then the system reported that Kusue's obsession level had increased significantly again. Lee was shocked. Women were always nothing but trouble. Dudan reminded him that if he gave up now, they would all die. The guy made an angry face and said, "Hey, consider meeting me a big failure. If you serve me properly, you can count on a quick death." He asked Dudin if this performance was quite cruel now, and he agreed. Lee sighed. He puts in so much effort behind the scenes to keep his image from falling apart. The guy shouted, "Come on, shorty." For the sake of survival, the assistant repeated the words of the owner. Lee walked into the room with firewood in his hands and shouted that he was back, asking where Sui was, whether she had already died. The girl looked out from behind the curtain and replied that she was here. The owner walked inside with a decisive step and threw firewood on the floor. He ordered her to take a bath and change her clothes already. She walks around constantly untidy and disgraces him. Or she didn't like the dress. The girl said that the dress was beautiful and took up the firewood. Lee barked. Did he tell her to collect firewood? The owner said that the wounds would open up and he would have to spend money on treatment again. She asked in surprise what she should do. The boy threw wood into the fire and ordered her to tidy herself up and wash herself properly for her master. Sui thought that he really was still the same Li Yuanyi, and for a moment, she thought that his conscience had awakened. Li was pouring water into a large barrel, and the girl thought that he would never change. He told her to go wash herself. The other slaves had more impressive figures and more beautiful faces, and they were hotter than Sui. Whenever he goes out for a walk, his eyes are delighted. But it is disgusting to look at her. Dudan warned Lee that he was overdoing it. The guy shouted menacingly at the slave to quickly go and wash herself. Dudan warned the owner that he was overdoing it. Lee asked the assistant if it was true, and he confirmed it. Kusue silently looked at her master and began to slowly undress. She thought that since he had ordered it, she would have to obey. The girl took off her underwear and thought with horror that this would really happen tonight. The slave carefully touched the water with her foot. The temperature was comfortable. Sui sank into the water, and Lee was horrified. Chusue alone was already such a hassle, and the other 6 were no gift either. The guy grabbed his head. It was suicide. Dudin calmed him down. This had to be done to save his life. Lee laughed. He thought that rebirth was a lot of cheats and pathos. Certainly not humiliating himself like the last dog, the assistant said. But when Lee saves all the villains, he will have the 7 strongest warriors in this world. The guy perked up. He agreed, exactly. This is just a stage. There is a grandiose goal ahead. By this time, Sui reported that she was finished. The guy looked at the slave. A fragile beauty stood in front of him. The new dress surprisingly suited Kusui's face, and the guy's eyes involuntarily sparkled. The beauty lowered her eyes in embarrassment, and Lee muttered, "It'll do. At least it's clean." Lee remembered he needed to appease her to get points, and then buy her more approval points. The girl was confused. Could he really be unhappy? And immediately withdrew. The guy yawned and said that he would go to bed, and that she, once she had cleaned up, should come in and properly guard her master. He grabbed her by the face and muttered that if he woke up in the middle of the night and she wasn't in the room, he would have only himself to blame. If she moved away, he would rip her clothes off, pin her to the bed, and then... Sui screamed that she understood. Lee grumbled. "That's better." Dudan rejoiced. The obsession stopped. This time it worked. And Lee also ordered her not to touch the bath and firewood. If her wounds worsened, then he would have to pay for the doctor. Sui thought that meant he just didn't want to spend the money, which meant he didn't want her to get hurt or die. The girl shuddered. But that wasn't a bad thing. Suddenly, she began to cry. Although the escape had failed, she remained alive, and life had become better than before. The system congratulated Lee. The obsession level dropped significantly. 10 points were received, and the second-level system store was opened. Lee was delighted. Finally, if he continued, he could pump up Kusui's sympathy to the maximum. He looked at the beauty and thought, "Silly girl. This is not the same Li Yuanyi anymore. Someday the girl will understand that he really wants to see her smile and make her happy." With such pleasant thoughts in his mind, the guy quickly fell asleep, especially since it was already night outside. The boy snored peacefully, imagining how he would re-educate the fox. Suddenly, he felt someone moving nearby and quickly opened his eyes. Chu Sui sat on his bed, slowly taking off her new dress. Lee blushed, jumped up, and asked what she was doing. The girl asked in surprise if the owner hadn't said that she should lie with him. He quickly pulled away from her and asked when he had ever said such a thing to her. The guy pinched his nose and cursed silently. Why was his nose burning so much? Was it really going to bleed? He wasn't a eunuch after all. Lee shouted that she thought so highly of herself, but she saw her protruding ribs. Only dogs like to chew bones. Kusui wondered, didn't the owner's recent behavior mean that he wanted to? The guy grumbled, and as she understood it, Lee was worried that he, as a healthy man, might not be able to control himself. He told the slave that she would sleep in bed today, and he on the floor. Lee pushed the girl back into her place. She didn't understand why she would sleep on the bed. The guy grumbled that Sui was a walking disaster. She scared him so much that he tore his lower back, so he would sleep on the floor. He understood that if something went wrong, Sui's obsession level would immediately rise. It was too dangerous. She tried to object, but Lee barked at her to shut her mouth and go to bed, and he stretched out on the floor. The girl looked at her owner in confusion. It seemed he had already fallen asleep. Sui turned to the window and thought how strange it was that she felt so calm today. She heard her master's peaceful snoring and soon fell asleep herself. She dreamed of that terrible night when people from the wolf tribe attacked her home village. Father shouted at Kusui to run faster and not to even dare to turn around. The little fox obediently ran through the forest, swallowing tears and sighing heavily. Suddenly, she felt that an arrow had hit her. The girl was seriously wounded. She fell to the ground and lost consciousness, a large scarlet bloodstain spreading beneath her. Kusui woke up in a cage, shackled, and the slave traders were cheerfully discussing her price. The little fox growled menacingly at those who had destroyed her home and deprived her of freedom. The girl curled up on the bed and trembled, reliving the old horror. Lee asked Kusui if she was okay. Doubting explained that she was having a nightmare and it would be difficult to wake her up. The guy asked the assistant if he could see what she was dreaming about. He said no, but her obsession level was growing again. Lee said, a noble girl of the Fox clan, sold into slavery as a child, it is not difficult to guess what she dreams about. The book said that due to a severe childhood trauma, Chu Sui's Fox bloodline power was sealed and she was defenseless. He saw a wound on her, which meant that her wounds had not yet completely healed. The guy quietly took out a medical kit and took out the medicine. Lee decided he needed to rub it in harder to make it heal faster. Lee carefully watched the little slave girl from the demonic Fox clan lying on his bed. Kusue trembled in pain as the antiseptic stung her open wound. She endured and thought about what the owner was doing to her. Why it hurt so much. During the day, he forced her to eat, and at night he changed places with her. Is he really doing this to lull her vigilance and poison her? The girl thought that if the owner wanted to kill her, then let him do it already. Why wait so long? Her hand reached for the shard of glass. It was so painful. Anyone would have woken up from it. Having treated the girl's wound, Lee stretched out on the floor again and fell asleep peacefully. She approached him cautiously with the shard, thinking that since he had tormented her while she was sleeping, he shouldn't blame her. Suddenly, she felt her bleeding wound on her leg itching. Sui looked at the wound and was stunned. Did it really heal that quickly? The girl remembered how the owner had said during the day that this would hurt her. She looked at Lee in bewilderment. Was he really treating her? Her sympathy for him increased. The next morning, Dudan tried his best to wake Lee up, shouting at him to wake up. Something bad had happened. The real protagonist also moved into this world. Dudan detected fluctuations through the system. Sleepy Lee asked who the real protagonist was. Doubting said the hero of the original novel, Shi Tianrui. The guy jumped up. The very hero. Handsome, good in bed, and a gifted talker. But what to do now? Dudan also didn't expect that they would react so quickly. With his abilities, he would quickly catch up and overtake Lee. System Assistant Lee believed that the most important thing now was to speed up the process of re-educating Kusue. If the protagonist completes the task with the 7 villains earlier, then the main system will erase them from Lee. The guy said thoughtfully that if you think about it, there's no need to panic so much. Last night he got 30 points, which means his strategy is working. Whoever is closer wins. And Li Yuanyi should have died long ago. Which means the plot has already changed, the assistant agreed. Lee said that if Tianrui wanted to get close to Chusui and change her, he should go through him first. The guy suggested that his assistant act according to the plan and simply be on guard with the main character. Chusui had already woken up and couldn't understand who the owner was talking to. She heard Li Yuanyi approaching her. The boy stroked her head and told the fox to be a good girl. Sleep well and wait for him at home. Then he tiptoed out of the room and closed the door behind him. The girl couldn't believe it. He called her a little fox and asked her to be smart. Wasn't it a dream? Li Yuanyi walked through the wild mountain forest and hummed a song cheerfully. He thought he could take Kusue into the forest and fake a wild animal attack, and then save her by injuring himself. And then he heard with horror that there was someone in the bushes. He shouted, "Who's there? Come out immediately!" A rustling sound was heard again in the nearby bushes. Someone was hiding there. A girl appeared from there and asked Lee not to attack. They were from the same tribe. It was Zhen Yi. She said that a terrible howl was heard from far away in the forest. It turns out that it was Lee singing. The girl noticed that she had already seen him in the small square. He seemed to be Li Yuanyi. Lee replied that he just sang a couple of lines, thinking that there was no one there. Did he really scare them? The girls whispered. Perhaps this is just the namesake of that Yuan Yi, that ugly and dirty pervert. And this one is even cute. The guy was very pleased. He mentally asked the girls to say it louder. Zhen Yi noticed that Yuan Yi had changed a lot, as if he had become a completely different person. Lee asked what the names of these beautiful girls were. Zhen Yi took out a fruit, handed it to Lee, and said that her name was Xiao Yuan, offering the guy to take this. They had just picked. The guy replied that it was inconvenient and tried to refuse the gift, but the girl insisted. They had collected a lot today. He could try. The interlocutor narrowed her eyes slightly and said that he could let his slave try it. Lee became wary and replied, "She is just a slave. Why should she try? She is unworthy." Zhen Yi told her stunned friends that they needed to move on. The girl headed in the opposite direction from Lee. After taking a few steps, she turned around and said with a smile, "Bye, Li Yuanyi." He waved back and said goodbye. The guy watched her go and asked Dowden if his memory was failing him. Was there a beauty named Xiao Yuan in the novel? The system assistant replied that there was no one named Xiao Yuan among the 7 heroines Lee needed to rescue. Dowden suggested that because Lee is so attractive now, Perhaps his charisma has attracted other female characters. Lee laughed. Perhaps that was indeed the case. The guy was sitting in the kitchen, getting ready to cook. He cursed. Cooking is such a hassle every time. The flint has run out again. And now, how can I light the wood in the fireplace? Lee asked Dudin if he had a lighter. He replied that he did. It cost 1 point. A moment later, a working lighter appeared in Lee Yuanyi's hand. He chuckled. Let these country bumpkins see the great invention of the new era. The lighter. The door opened slightly, and Ku Sui asked the owner if he was in the kitchen. The guy stepped on the lighter and laughed and replied, "Yes, of course." But, coming to his senses, he said menacingly, "Stop. Why on earth does this bother the slave?" The girl approached him and stuttered that she would prepare everything herself. Lee grabbed some dry brushwood from the fire and told Sui to cook. He will be practicing making a fire and asked not to disturb him. The guy started to twist the stick to create sparks from the other stick by friction. He thought that making fire by friction was a mockery of modern man. But she looks at him. The girl took the brushwood from him and said that she would do it better. A fire flared up in the slave's hand and she instantly lit the fire. Lee was shocked. Wow, that's amazing. And no lighter was needed. Sui said coldly that although her strength had not yet recovered, she could still make a few sparks. The girl lowered her eyes sadly. The guy was stunned. She just used magic. Although this is a fantasy world, but seeing it in real life is completely different. He tugged at her dress, a lot of different questions going through his head. Lee asked if this gesture needed to be used in conjunction with some kind of spell. The fox replied that it was not necessary. It was simply necessary to concentrate the force and align it with the intention. The guy was amazed. Wow, she always lights a fire like this and doesn't burn her fingers. She was surprised. No, it doesn't burn. Lee bombarded her with questions about whether there are side effects of this magic and whether it can be learned. Lee cursed. This is really cool. It's probably environmentally friendly. Well, yeah, with magic, you don't need technology. The girl froze for a moment. She did not understand at all what the owner was talking about, but for some reason, she suddenly found it all very sweet. The inner demon immediately poked Sui. Was she crazy? She really thought he was cute. She stood up abruptly, and an inner voice screamed that she must not forget how he had tormented her all these years. The voice whispered that the owner was terrible, that it was all just a pretense. And Sui remembered that he had changed a lot over the past few days. Dudan told Lee that he could exchange points for skills. The guy was taken aback. Could this really be exchanged too? Sui thought that although Li Yuan-yi behaved rudely towards her, he did not beat her or humiliate her. He even treated her wounds and allowed her to sleep on the bed. Lee asked what skills he could buy now. Dudin offered Danger Foresight for 45 points. The guy decided that it was too expensive for him, and 10 seconds didn't mean anything. It was too early to buy skills. Ku Sui glanced sideways at her owner. Besides, he looked nice now and smelled nice. The fox thoughtfully poured water into the cauldron. Thinking about the changes in her owner, she poured and poured water, filling the cauldron to the very brim. Lee realized that something was wrong. The girl was clearly not herself. She was blushing and then gloomy. He urgently needed to come up with something. And then, an idea struck him. He took out the fruit that had been given to him and handed it to the girl, saying, "Ku, look." The slave was very surprised at where Li Yuan-yi got the melon. He explained that when he was collecting firewood in the morning, he met a girl, and she gave him a melon, saying it was very sweet. Sui frowned. Li had become more handsome now, and as soon as he left the house, a girl immediately appeared and gave him a melon. Li asked if they, girls, didn't like sweet fruits and beautiful flowers. She could eat this melon later. But the girl irritably replied that she did not want to eat this melon. The guy asked if Sui really thought she had the right to refuse what he was giving her. He declared that the kitchen was too smoky. He was leaving, and she should cook him some normal food, and he quickly ran away. Lee sighed and asked his assistant, "Well, he got away in time. Everything is still under control, isn't it?" Dudin was puzzled. Something was wrong. The system was recording Q's emotional fluctuations, but it wasn't an obsession. The guy breathed a sigh of relief. The main thing is that it's not an obsession, and that's okay. Sui's eyes sparkled with jealousy. She looked angrily at the gift and thought, They gave you a melon and you took it. What do you mean? You accept everything. Lee opened the system window. The system had very few functions, and even fewer points. He grabbed his head. How could he possibly level up at this rate? Duden reassured him that there was no need to rush. Once all the villains appeared, it would be easier to get points. The guy asked the assistant if there would be any bonuses if you got points from all the villains. He mentally saw 7 beauties and laughed contentedly, but quickly came to his senses. The guy imagined how all these beauties dreamed of him dying and were trying to finish him off. With just Kusui, there are more than enough problems. But now, there will be 7 of them. He doesn't really need such happiness. At the square, the village elder Shu Fu announced that this winter everything was as usual. The female slaves were picking cotton. The men were hunting. All female slaves will be accompanied by second-rank warriors from the wolf tribe. Li Yuan-yi peered around, trying to figure out where his precious Kusui was. Finally, he saw her. Oh, here she is, the girl. Feeling his gaze, looked back. The owner winked at her cheerfully, surprising the girl once again. But Kusui turned away from him abruptly. She was still angry at him for the melon. The guy was upset, but come on, he did give her a melon yesterday, so why be so angry? The slave set out to pick cotton, and Lee thought with regret how much longer he had to play the villain. He sighed. Why is everything so complicated with women? In novels, a harem is assembled literally in a jiffy. 5 days later, the slaves returned, but Kusui was not there. Li Yuan-yi demanded that the elder explain to him what was going on. Su Fu was indignant. Yuan-yi had become completely insolent. He had already sent people to find out everything, but the guy insisted on where the answer was. The elder called out to one of the warriors accompanying the slaves. Su Fu asked, "What's the matter?" The slave girl Kusui from the Li household still hadn't returned. The warrior mumbled. She was withdrawn. The other slaves pushed her aside. So she was picking cotton somewhere in the corners. Then she disappeared completely. The warrior heard from other slaves that she was kidnapped by people of the Dark Tribe. The guy grabbed the warrior. Sui was kidnapped and he remained silent. Wasn't he supposed to protect the slaves? The warrior objected. He was sent to keep an eye on them. But she herself climbed where she shouldn't have and was left alone. It's not his fault. Lee shouted that the warrior was talking nonsense, useless trash that he couldn't even protect the girl. The warrior blocked the blow, and behind his back they whispered, "Chu Sui has disappeared. Yuan Yi will have to do everything himself. He doesn't have any money." The elder demanded that the men stop fighting immediately. The guy contemptuously removed his hand and walked away from the careless warrior. Li Yuan-yi stated that Kusui was kidnapped, not killed, so she could still be brought back. And he will definitely find her and bring her back home. They shouted at his back. Li Yuan-yi, isn't she just a slave? How much pathos did he make because of her? At home, Doubting told Li that although his appearance changed the plot, the scene of Kusui's kidnapping, as in the novel, remained unchanged. The assistant added that if they saved the girl before Shi Tianrui, they would seize the initiative. They must do it. Meanwhile, Shi Tianrui stood near the city gate and talked with his assistant. The guy asked him, "I think he said that he discovered another system. Who has it?" Shi Tianrui Shuaidin's system replied that it could not be determined yet. She noticed that the worthless master Ku Sui should have died long ago, but he was still alive. Maybe it was him. Shuaidin assured the owner that it was not a big deal. Minor deviations from the plot were common among secondary characters. Tianrui chuckled. Who is afraid of him? We need to save Ku Sui and take her away from him. And then they will begin their journey around the world. She was sure that Sui would become his obedient lamb, because her master beat her and humiliated her. Li Yuanyi suddenly sneezed, wondering who was talking about him like that behind his back. The guy had already packed his things to go look for the kidnapped Ku Sui. There was a ringing silence in the gloomy, dark cave. Water dripped gently from the hanging rock onto Ku Sui, who was chained up. When a tribe commits a grave crime, it incurs the punishment of the gods, and the entire clan turns into a dark tribe of outcasts. They will not be accepted by any tribe. They can only wander forever, plunging into darkness. One of the dark tribe girls exclaimed how hungry she was. her stomach growling demandingly. She looked at the young captive with burning eyes and smiled. The body of the captured Kusui was so tender and appetizing that it made one's mouth water. The girl said that she could not stand it any longer and was dying of hunger. She asked the boss if she could try just one piece of meat, to at least satisfy her hunger a little. But the boss grabbed her hand, asking where she was going in such a hurry. It was clear that she was hungry, but she needed to be patient for a little while. The warden squeezed the knife and noticed how beautiful the captive was. She placed the blade of the dagger against Kusui's pale cheek. The chieftain lowered the dagger to the girl's chest and said, "Let's see what kind of treasure they caught this time." The squad leader decided that with such a figure and delicate skin, stabbing her with a knife and eating her would be simply sacrilege. She cut off the top button of her bodice and sighed. And what a smell! She hadn't smelled such an aroma for many years. The boss chuckled. Once in her youth, she too had the same beautiful face and rich body aroma. The woman nodded her head and suddenly burst out laughing like crazy. Kusui silently watched the strange warrior, the leader of the dark tribe. The woman laughed, and flames danced in the eyes of the young fox, setting everything around on fire. Su Fu told Li that the dark tribe was setting traps and constantly moving, but he was going alone, without a warrior. He was clearly looking for death. The guy replied that if the elder was talking about the warrior he had beaten up during the day, then he could do without him. The elder was surprised. Yuan Yi didn't like Kusui, so why would he take such a risk for her? The boy told the elder that he had a reason why he had to return Kusui. Su Fu was amazed at the reason and demanded to know. Li was a little confused. To fit the image, it is better to embellish the reason. The guy said that Kusui was his slave, and if the males of the dark tribe defiled her, then what would he do with such shame? The elder barked that Li was doing stupid things, but the boy objected. A man lives by his conscience, like a tree by bark. He told the elder not to interfere in his affairs, and if he interfered, he would deal with him too. Su Fu reminded him that he was a close friend of Yuan Yi's father, so he decided to bring him to his senses and, if necessary, give him a slave from his house. Li was surprised. He didn't think that the elder was such a good person. He even worried about the previous owner of this body. Despite the persuasion, the boy, together with Dudin, went out of the village gates and went in search of Kusui. Some strange, magical streams appeared behind the guy. Li felt a chill next to him, but the sensation soon disappeared. He turned around sharply and asked who was there. But no one answered him, and there was no one nearby. Concerned, Dudin again suggested to the owner that he buy the skill of premonition of danger. The system assistant was confident that in their situation, this could even save lives. But the guy objected. 45 points were too expensive. If he exchanged them now, he would be left with nothing. He asked his assistant if it could be cheaper, and suddenly magical currents enveloped Li. He exclaimed in surprise, "What was this?" The guy looked around. Everything around was still empty, but he clearly felt someone's presence. The remnants of magical energy glistened near Li, and he became wary. Li Yuan-Yi didn't even remember losing consciousness. He woke up in a dark cave to the sound of dripping water. He muttered, "Damn it, is the faucet leaking again? Someone in the dorm, turn it off already." And then he realized, stop, something is wrong here. He stood up and looked around, wondering where he was, why torches were burning nearby, and why he was lying in a cave on a mat. The guy called out to Dudin, asking where he was. The assistant appeared and congratulated Li. He was captured by the second villain, the one from the dark tribe. Dudin warned that she was already on her way and wished the owner to hold on. Li swore. There wasn't even a small hole here for him to hide. Listening to the steps, the guy was surprised that she was running towards him. Suddenly, the girl rushed at Li and knocked him down onto the mat. The guy cursed. She is the strongest villain, and she is very beautiful. Li thought, she's a villain. Why all of a sudden such passion? He carefully stopped the fatal beauty. The girl whispered. He woke up just in time. She wants to give birth to his child. The guy was confused about what she was talking about. Maybe she, like a female praying mantis, wanted to kill him after mating. The villainess persistently pulled Li by the pants. He pulled away from her, saying that having a child was a very serious matter, and that they needed to get closer first. Lee knew he had to find Kusui now or he would die. And if she saw him with another woman, his obsession would only increase. Dudan reported that badly, the level of obsession with the villain began to grow. The guy was horrified. Oh my God, her level of obsession was growing too. Suddenly, the villainess tore off one of Lee's trousers and he cursed silently. He shouted that he understood her, but there was no need to rush. In this regard, he was more experienced than her. The girl was surprised that he was more experienced than her in having children. That he really understood this. Lee said with confusion that one should first learn about the theory and only then move on to practice. The girl objected. She wanted to practice. Her parents slept together naked for just one night and she appeared. She nudged the stunned Lee, and he asked if she had any brothers or sisters. Her parents didn't want just one child. If she is alone, have you ever wondered why she is the only one in the family? She stepped back in surprise and asked why her parents only had one child. And that was her. Lee said having a child requires the right time, place, and consent from each partner, which is important. Dudan confirmed that it was important to avoid the villains knowing about each other's existence early on. The girl approached Lee and asked him to tell her everything in more detail. Lee asked if her parents loved each other very much. She confirmed that they did. Otherwise, they would never have been together. He said, "You see, we just met. Shouldn't we get closer first?" When there are feelings, a man is cheerful and full of strength. But without feelings, he is lethargic. The villain diligently wrote everything down. The girl exclaimed with admiration that she had not made a mistake in choosing a person. He understood so much. She snuggled up to him and purred that she would definitely give birth to the most beautiful child in the world from him. Lee pulled away and snorted in displeasure. Had she not even listened to what he had told her? The villainess reached out to him, saying that she liked him very much. Last time, when she saw him protecting the slave, she fell deeply in love with him. Lee was confused because she had already seen Chusui. Dudan panicked. What was going on? The villains shouldn't see each other ahead of time. The girl said that it was okay if Lee loved her less, but she loved him twice as much. The villain used her magical power. Streams of magic bound the guy. Pressing him to the mat, he exclaimed what she was doing now. The girl slowly began to take off her clothes, looking at the guy. She replied, of course, he was starting the process of having a baby. Come on. He had to teach her that. Streams of magical energy flew through the cave. The girl was literally burning with passion. She pressed herself against Lee, who was bound by magic, and sighed languidly. Her face flushed. She was determined to get pregnant at any cost. Lee's hands automatically slid over her body, but he noted that people shouldn't be forced like that. He demanded that she first remove her black energy and let him be on top. The girl smiled. Lee blushed. Her mother told her that if a man blushes, it means he is in love. The guy came to his senses. Oh well, he even liked it for a moment. He thought that he needed to control himself better. She stroked Lee's face, noticing that he was embarrassed. The villainess promised to be gentle and not hurt him. The guy's nose started bleeding from excitement. He shouted that he didn't need any tenderness and demanded that she get off him. She babbled that he was so warm. She loved the warmth of his body. The girl pressed her lips to the captives. And Lee wondered if she really was a villain and he needed to conquer her. Dudan shouted at the owner not to give in to external temptations. Lee was terrified, and he was about to lose control of himself. The villainess's tight young breasts pressed against his chest, making him dizzy. She gently touched his neck, saying that her mother taught her that when passion and desire reach their peak, it is the best time to conceive a child. And it seemed to her that tonight she would definitely be able to get pregnant from her captive. Lee thought that this girl knew much more about this than he did. He gathered his last strength, deciding that if he was truly a man, he could hold out for 30 seconds. The countdown began, and the beauty actively tempted her victim. Li Yuanyi felt his entire body begin to burn from the proximity of the incredible beauty. The boy mentally told Dudan that he was going to do it. The girl looked around warily. Dudan shouted at Li, with the character of Deng Ting Shuang. If he doesn't manage to make a child with her today, she won't let him go until she gets pregnant. And having become a father, Li is unlikely to be distracted and re-educate other villains for the sake of their main goal. He pulled away from the girl and mentally warned Dudan that if Li lost his temper, the assistant would be held responsible. Tin Xuan looked at the guy questioningly, not understanding what was happening. And the assistant said, "Of course, it's hard to restrain oneself when such a beauty is in front of him. But one must think about the consequences of failing the task." And Ku Sui is still waiting for Li to save her. The guy growled at Dudan to stop talking and let him think. Tinshuan noted with embarrassment that she had bitten him, but it didn't hurt him. Li was at a loss as to what to do now, whether there was anything at all that could stop her. And then he remembered that the dark race begins to absorb his energy during intimacy. A hungry person can die from exhaustion. If Tinshuan loves him so much, then she definitely won't want him to die. But she needs to choose the right words. Sitting down on the mat, the guy said that he was very hungry, just terribly hungry. The girl shuddered. She forgot that she hadn't fed him at all. In too much of a hurry, she almost killed him. Li breathed a sigh of relief. His idea had been a success. This time, it had gone his way. Dudan praised him. "Very clever, master, excellent work." Deng Tingshuang quickly got dressed and asked Li to wait while she got him some food. The villain rushed towards the exit. Li decided that there was no second to lose. He would escape now, but the assistant warned that if Tingshuang returned and saw that Li had escaped, the obsession would instantly jump to 100%. Li froze. And what to do now? If he runs away, he will die. And if he doesn't run away, he will also die. Dudan suggested, calming down. The guy asked the assistant if there were any weaknesses from Deng Tingshuang's past in the original story. Meanwhile, the girl came out of the cave and whistled, and a tiger approached her. The predator bared its fanged mouth and growled threateningly. She jumped up to the beast and swung at it, preparing to strike. Tingshuang broke a branch to secure her long, luxurious hair. She warned the beast that she was serious now, that she was in a hurry to return and feed her man to his fill. The girl said with a smile that she had returned and got a large tiger for Li, which he preferred, paws or back. But upon entering the cave, Deng Tingshuang froze. The guy was no longer there. Meanwhile, Li Yuanyi made a fishing rod and settled down on the riverbank, saying, "May the fish be caught and may they be bigger?" Behind him, he could hear the whispers of the girls from the dark tribe. The guy pulled the rod and pulled out a fish. He asked Dudan what they were saying about him. The assistant said that the one on the left, the plump one, says that the guy is too skinny and the meat will be tough and tasteless. The one on the right said that Li has a big ass. If baked, it would be just right, the guy cursed. Dudin concluded that all these cannibals were targeting Li Yuanyi. The guy said loudly that one fish would not be enough to eat his fill. He needed to catch another one. He himself quickly grabbed his prey. He sent the girls away indecently and rushed towards the cave with a fish in his hand. Li ran as fast as he could towards Deng Tingshuang's saving lair, the cannibals rushing after him. He decided that this world was too dangerous and that the re-education of villains needed to be accelerated. If he doesn't get more points to exchange for skills, he will definitely die. Dudin shouted to his master to run faster. They were almost there. Only 13 steps left. Li cursed. Damn dark tribe forest. This is no place for people at all. He thought that he didn't want to die here. And then his foot caught on a tree root. The guy fell headlong onto the forest path. The system assistant shouted, "Things are bad. There are already 9 steps left." Li broke out in a sweat. Was he really going to die here and have these ladies eat him up? He feverishly rose to his feet, and Dudin said, 7 steps, 6. Already 3 steps. And then he heard the whistle of some blade, as if something had been cut off. Something fell next to the guy, and he asked his assistant in horror if he had already been hit. He asked Dudin to answer. It was not the sound of his lower body being cut off and falling to the ground. Li was so scared that he didn't even want to look. But Dudan insisted that the boy turn around and look. He swallowed excitedly, turned around and froze in horror at the sight he saw. Behind him stood 3 cannibals, all of them beheaded, their blood spilling around them. One of the bodies swayed and began to fall into a pool of blood. Tingshuang asked Li gloomily, so he left the cave to come to them. Her eyes were flashing with anger, Dudan said. Things are bad. Dan's emotional state began to fluctuate chaotically, and in 3 seconds, a rapid obsession would begin. The guy glanced at the villainess's bloody hand, with which she had cut off the cannibals' heads. Deng Tingshuang muttered, "If that's the case, then there's only one thing left." But Li didn't let her finish. He quickly hugged the enraged girl. The villainess's face became softer. She was surprised that the guy himself hugged her, and then a blush flashed across her face, and a glimmer of happiness lit up her eyes. Lee told her that he was glad she made it in time and saved him. The girl was taken aback. He showed her the catch and told her to look. He caught this fish for her. Ting Shuang was at a loss. And Lee said that for him, a grown man, eating at someone else's expense was completely shameful. He handed her the fish. She was so skinny, so he decided to take care of her and went out to catch some fish for her. The girl smiled, so it meant he hadn't run away but had gone out to hunt for her. Lee nodded his head. She hugged him and whispered that she had misunderstood him, that she thought he had run away. But he was the best man in the world. They returned to the cave. Tin Xuan apologized for misunderstanding him, but she is not weak and will always protect him. Lee shuddered. If he had run away then, he would have ended up like that tiger. The girl handed him a piece of meat and told him to eat it. Lee was stunned. Eating raw, he began to cry mentally and desperately asked to go home. The boy extended his trembling hand towards the still warm meat of the beast, and Tin Xuan hurried him to eat faster. As soon as he finished, they would make a baby. The guy was shaking with disgust, and he told the girl that he doesn't eat raw meat. She frowned. Not eating meat means not mating. Du Din sounded the alarm. Tin Shuang decided that Lee did not want a child with her. Lee explained to her that if she ate raw meat, she would get sick, and it would only interfere with mating. The girl asked in surprise if people from his wolf tribe could not eat raw meat. The guy asked to give him a little time. He would cook the meat, and after they ate, they would do it right away. He asked her to help him and cut a hole in the stone, and he would cook her something tasty. Tin Xuan obediently agreed to help her chosen one. The girl armed herself with a sharp stone and headed towards the cobblestone. While Lee was fiddling with the water, it began to quickly chip away at pieces of a large boulder. The boy placed a large bowl near the water source to begin cooking. Having looked into the system's store, he thought that he could get this seasoning for meat and fish. A second later, he had a 1-point packet of seasoning in his hand. Deng Ting Shuang glared at the boy while carrying firewood. He asked her to help him with the fish, and she wondered when they would start mating. The boy carefully built a fireplace out of stones and placed a large bowl of water on top of it. The girl asked warily whether it was ready or not. Lee threw fish and spices into the water and said, "Right now, I promise it will be quick." He quietly took his lighter out of his secret pocket. Approaching the fireplace made of stones, he quickly lit the wood with a lighter. Seeing the fire burst out, Deng Ting Shuang shuddered. The girl jumped to the side in fear, keeping away from the flames. Meanwhile, Lee covered the bowl with a large leaf and said, "As long as it turns out tasty, now we need to wait a little." Dudan told the owner to take a look at Tin Shuang immediately. She sat in the far corner of the cave, shaking and sighing heavily. The guy approached her and looked at her in surprise, not understanding what had happened to her. She asked Lee if he had really gone to all that trouble to start a fire and kill her. The girl did not take her frightened eyes off the brightly blazing fire in the hearth. With every flash of flame, Deng Ting Shuang squinted and shuddered. Li Yuan-yi was surprised that she was really so afraid of fire. She asked angrily, "Not eating raw meat is just an excuse, isn't it?" Dark energy swirled around. Tin Shuan said that he did not want to have children with her at first, but only to kill her. Li sighed. It was worth being distracted for a second, and she had already come up with a whole drama about betrayal. The guy calmly walked towards the cave's owner, who was noticeably nervous. Lee extended his hand to her to calm her down. She looked into his eyes and did not feel any threat. He took her hand and felt that it was still trembling despite its terrifying strength. Li Yuan-yi explained to the girl that she needed to light a fire. Only then would the cauldron heat up and the meat cook. He adjusted her hair and continued, the fire making the dark cave brighter and revealing her beautiful face. Besides, the fire in the cave made it much warmer, hadn't she noticed? The girl wondered if he really hadn't intended to kill her. He sat her down and told her that if she didn't like the fire, then she could sit there quietly and rest. Lee sorted through the thin branches, choosing the straightest and strongest ones. He decided, it seems, that these are the best. Then they will be their chopsticks. Soon, fish in a delicious sauce and 2 plates with chopsticks were steaming on the stone table. Li Yuan-yi explained that this fish is always eaten from the belly, where there are no bones, and the meat is fatty and tender. She looked at the sticks in bewilderment, not knowing what to do with them. Finally, She carefully poked them into the sauce. The guy explained that chopsticks weren't supposed to be held that way and offered to teach her how to use them. He carefully adjusted the chopsticks in her thin, graceful hand. Lee patiently showed the girl and explained how to use her index finger and thumb. When the chopsticks began to obey, the guy invited her to try the prepared dish. She carefully took a piece of fish and put it in her mouth, chewing it. She exclaimed that it was delicious. Li Yuanyi smiled. He wasn't lying. If she liked it, he could cook more. The girl quickly ate the fish. Dudan congratulated Li. The sympathy level increased, and 30 points were added to his account. The guy decided that since he now had glasses, he would exchange them for a premonition of danger. The assistant exclaimed that he would now organize everything, and the required module was successfully loaded. Li asked Dudin to synchronize the data on Deng Ting Shuang. Dudan obeyed, and a picture of people hunting for a little girl appeared in Li's mind's eye. Deng Ting Shuang is a half-breed of a dark race member and a human. In early childhood, she lost her parents and was forced to wander and suffer. She was not accepted by either people or the dark race. She was hungry a lot. Sometimes she was on the verge of death. So she began to value food very much. Due to a difficult childhood, she ate whatever she could get her hands on. And with no one to guide her, she relied on her instincts. Eventually, reproduction became her main desire as she grew older. The girl was surprised why Li was crying, but he simply felt very sorry for her. He wiped away his tears and hugged the girl, pressing her close to him. Li assured Ting Shuang that he was with her and would never let her be alone again. She smiled and gently buried her face in his fluffy hair. Dudan congratulated the owner. His sympathy increased, and he received another 60 points to his account. Li wondered if he had done anything special. It was actually easy. People with torches gathered in the village square and were constantly making noise. Actually, no one wanted to go into the forest to look for Li Yuanyi. The villagers told Ku Sui not to go alone. They had already sent people to look for Li Yuanyi. The girl angrily asked why exactly her master had disappeared. Had they deliberately decided to harm her master? Shi Tianrue, the real hero of this novel, watched this scene with interest. He was perplexed. Something didn't add up. According to the plot, he was supposed to save her now. How did it happen that she returned on her own? And what to do? Meanwhile, Li Yuanyi was still in Deng Tingshuang cave. She grabbed his hand and pushed him back onto the mat, and he tried to calm her down. The girl reminded him that Li had said that once he ate, they would mate. Tingshuang said with resentment that she wanted to have a lot of children from him. Li asked Tingshuang if she remembered why she was bullied as a child, and if she wanted their children to experience that. The girl flinched in surprise and stared at Yuanyi. She cautiously asked how he knew about her. He explained that she did not have the characteristic physical features of the dark race that had been subjected to divine punishment, and the dark race cannot reproduce among themselves. So he thought that she was a half-breed. Tingshuang understands better than him how much the world hates people like her. The girl stood up and said that she knew it. She told the guy that she would go out to cool off a bit while they postponed mating. The girl quickly disappeared from the cave, leaving only traces of her energy. Li breathed a sigh of relief, finally calming down and pulling himself together. But Dudin shouted, "What peace? There is trouble at home." He reported that the level of Ku Sui's obsession was rapidly increasing and was already close to critical. The guy shouted, "Why didn't Dudin say so right away? We need to come back quickly." Dudin said that they wouldn't have time to return. He would immediately teleport Li. The guy was surprised why he hadn't done this before. The system assistant looked down. Teleportation requires 50 points. Li was furious and couldn't even find what to say. Dudin sighed. These are the rules of the system. Nothing can be done. The guy growled that he was buying it and demanded to be teleported immediately. At that very moment, Li Yuanyi found himself at the very gate of his village. He carefully parted the bushes and looked around. Dudin informed the owner that they were there. The guy quickly came out of the bushes and walked towards the square. Li noticed that despite it being night, the square in the center of the village was filled with people. He shouted loudly that he had returned and asked them to disperse and let him pass. Li was surprised to see that Ku Sui had beaten one of the warriors almost to death. The boy shouted to the slave that he was back and that he was okay. She released the dead warrior in surprise and asked in confusion how he had even returned. Dudin said that Ku Sui's obsession level began to decrease. Li was surprised. He thought she wanted him to die. The elder angrily asked Li what he was teaching his slave. She dared to hit a tribal warrior. She completely lost her fear. But Li objected. She was protecting her master. It was natural. So Kusui was not to blame for anything. And anyway, Li was carried away by the dark race, and their warriors turned out to be useless. So it's better for the elder to keep quiet. The guy took Sui by the hand and said that they needed to go home. The slave looked at her master in surprise, while the village elder lamented. Li took her hand, and she suddenly felt incredibly happy. The young fox's heart was pounding wildly, and a blush of embarrassment appeared on her cheeks. Dudin rejoiced. Chu Sui's sympathy level increased. Li gained another 60 points. Shi Tianrui was amazed that Li Yuanyi had survived again. He asked the system if it had synchronized a pirated version of the novel for him. Shuaiden was indignant. It was a completely licensed version. The owner could be sure of it. But the plot clearly went wrong. Tianrui decided to go and re-educate Deng Tingshuang in the forest of the dark race. Li Yuanyi's appearance in her home village was also noticed by Zhen Yi. She couldn't understand whether Li Yuanyi had actually managed to escape from the clutches of the dark race unharmed. The girl mage turned from a snake into a human again, shedding her skin. She snorted. This useless, impoverished aristocrat who can't even lift a heavy object. How did he even manage to escape? The elder was burning with anger at Li. And he was also telling stories about being kidnapped by a dark race. A pure lie. Su Fu assumed that the guy was just wandering around the forest, and now he came back and was playing the hero. Amidst the village elders' grumbling, Li Yuanyi and Chu Sui returned to Li's house. The guy kept his eyes on his beautiful slave. He noticed that her attitude had changed. The girl blushed with embarrassment and timidly lowered her eyes to the floor. She couldn't understand why the gentleman kept looking at her so intently. Li Yuanyi reached out and gently touched Sui's thin shoulder. The girl jumped to the side in fear. He asked what was wrong, whether everything had just been fine, or whether she was awkward with him. He really didn't understand. Everything was fine. Why she suddenly bristled? The slave's face flushed, and she babbled that she needed to go and prepare food for her master. The girl rushed to the kitchen as fast as she could. Li didn't understand if she was angry. Dudin said that her sympathy was still slowly growing. Li smiled. Was she really starting to fall in love with him, I wonder? It seemed like it was time to change strategy. Dudin was alarmed. Li asked what else was going on. The assistant said it was in Tinshuang. She returned to the cave and discovered Li missing. Believing he had escaped, her obsession grew rapidly. The guy grabbed his head, who came up with the idea that the villains can't meet each other. Dudan replied, the author of the novel. Did you want to kill the author? There are 7 heroines and none of them can cross paths. Is this a romantic line or a harem plot? Okay, first I need to go see Kusui and warn her. Otherwise, she'll get nervous again and do something bad. He quickly returned, and Dudan teleported him to the entrance of Deng Tingshuang cave. And Tinshuan raged in her cave. He spoke so beautifully. But in fact, he simply ran away. You can't trust anyone. She threateningly promised that Li Yuanyi would not be able to escape from her. Suddenly, she heard Li's voice. The guy asked Tingshuang what happened. The girl turned around and looked at him questioningly. Li had a new outfit in his hands. He told Tingshuang that he brought her a gift and offered to take a look. She froze and did not know what to answer. A storm was raging inside her. Finally, she threw herself at full speed on the neck of the guy whom she had been ready to kill a second ago. Her beautiful long hair flashed in the air. She exclaimed that she couldn't wait any longer. They had to make a baby right now. The girl begged Li to mate urgently and have a baby. Dudin whispered that the master should not give in. If she became pregnant, he would no longer run away and complete the task. Li asked if she knew how the dark race mates with the wolf tribe. They are actually different species. You have to be careful. She wondered if even mating could be dangerous. He confirmed, of course. Therefore, first he needs to understand the features of her body. Tinshuan did not understand how it was. Li replied that it wasn't that important. She trusted him after all. The girl nodded in confusion. Of course she trusted him. The guy explained that his tribe has a special ritual. They call it warming up. He decided to exhaust her. First, he must check the body structure of the dark race, and Tingshuang must try to relax. He lightly slid his hand over the girl's trembling body. Tin Xuan gasped. She had never felt anything like this before. The girl asked in surprise what it was. Li smiled. This is just the beginning. He again ran his skillful hands over her body, causing a new wave of sensations in the girl. Li mentally noted that the inexperienced body was indeed too sensitive. Li took the trembling girl in his arms and suggested that they go to the lair. She muttered, "Uh-huh," and buried her face in the broad chest of the guy she liked. He asked her if she wanted to continue. Tin Xuan agreed, saying that it was strange but nice. Li lightly ran his hand over her thin waist. The girl shuddered and froze. He caressed her untouched body, making her shudder and tense with sensation. Several minutes passed. Li Yuanyi looked at the gentle beauty. She got tired and fell asleep. Du Din was delighted. "Great move, master." He told Li the good news. Ting Shuang's obsession decreased, his sympathy increased, and the guy received 30 points. The guy sighed. Well, that meant his efforts weren't in vain. He fell onto the mat, saying that he was so tired and needed to rest too. Meanwhile, at Li Yuanyi's house, Chu Sui was trying to figure out what was happening to her. The girl was shaking slightly and looked at her thin hands in surprise. The young fox couldn't stop trembling. She was so used to having her power sealed, and she was very weak. But she remembered very well that she herself was able to deal with the women from the dark tribe and free herself. The girl realized that her strength seemed to have grown. But why did this happen? Zhen Yi saw that Li Yuanyi had not left the tribe today. So where did he disappear to? This seemed strange to the beauty, but very interesting. She needed to continue observing. She smiled mysteriously. This guy was becoming more and more interesting to her. After resting a bit, Li decided to make a fire in Deng Tingshuang cave. The girl woke up from the rustling and asked in surprise what had happened to her. Li replied with a smile that she had fallen asleep from fatigue and asked if she had rested. Tin Shuang was glad. He didn't leave, Li smiled. They still had to mate. How could he leave her? He carefully explained to her that he still needed to return to the tribe. Otherwise, his friends would worry. But Tin Shuan was against it. Li Yuanyi laughed that she had nothing to be afraid of, since she knew where he lived and he had nowhere to run. The guy asked her if she liked what he did to her. She confirmed it and said that she wanted more. Li said that in that case, she should let him go home for a while. He swore to the beauty that he would definitely not run away from her. She need not worry about that. The girl smiled thoughtfully and silently lowered her head a little. She told Li that she agreed if he marked her. The guy did not understand what this meant. Deng Tingshuang explained that she would be able to track his location at any time using the tag, which would give her peace of mind. Li asked in bewilderment, "How is this done?" Tingshuan walked up to him and pulled his t-shirt down, exposing part of his neck and said, "It's simple, just like that." At the moment when she put a mark on her man, Tingshuang's heart rejoiced with delight. Now he will be hers. She bit into the guy's body with her sharp teeth, leaving small marks on him. Li thought it was a little creepy when the villain knew your every move, but it was better not to provoke her. He asked if she could now track him. Tin Shuan nodded. If his life was in danger, she would know immediately. Li calmed down. Additional protection wouldn't hurt. Now the pros and cons seemed balanced. The boy asked the mistress of the dark cave if he could go now. She nodded with a loving smile. Yes, now it's possible. He said goodbye and left, deciding to move away and then use teleportation. Li was surprised. Ting Shuang had only bitten him and was already letting go so calmly. It began to seem suspicious to him. He and Du Dan walked quickly through the forest. Li was about to teleport when he heard Shi Tianrui's voice. Li remembered that the novel clearly stated that as soon as the main character entered the forest, Deng Tingshuang immediately dragged him away. The guy realized that the real protagonist had probably come to conquer Deng Tingshuang, but she didn't show up. The hero had already combed everything up and down, but he couldn't even find the shadow of Tin Shuan. The dark race almost twisted him. Shuiding calmed his master. Li realized that the hero seemed to be talking to his system. Li guessed that he had already occupied Tianrui's plot point, which is why he couldn't meet Deng Tingshuang. The guy chuckled. Well, what can you do? He, Li, is just trash. And Tianrui is a hero with an aura of luck, so let him act. But Tin Shuan is somewhere nearby, and if the hero meets her, he is a handsome man. But how can Li compete with him? Li Yuanyi had already spent his first night with Ting Shuang, and she was now responsible for him. Now, under no circumstances should he leave. Li asked the system to urgently return him to the Deng Ting Shuang cave. Dudin obeyed. Deng Ting Shuang was lounging on her bed, feeling very bored without the handsome Yuan Yi. Suddenly, she perked up, hearing some noise near the entrance to the cave. She turned around and became alert. Those were someone's footsteps. A smiling Yuan Yi appeared at the door and told the girl that he had suddenly remembered something. The beauty rushed to him, exclaiming that her baby had returned. He probably couldn't live without her. He hugged the girl and confirmed that it was very hard for him without her, and reminded her that he had given her the dress. And only after going outside did he realize that she hadn't shown up in a dress. He wanted to take a look before leaving. Li knew that today, under no circumstances should Ting Shuang be allowed out of the cave. She must not meet the real protagonist. After some time, the girl entered the main hall of the cave in her new outfit. She told her beloved that this outfit was very unusual. Li Yuan-yi explained to the girl that this was the clothing of the human race, and asked her if she liked the dress. The girl replied that she liked everything he gave her, and she blushed embarrassedly. Duden congratulated the owner. Deng Ting Shuang's obsession sharply decreased, and his sympathy increased. He received another 30 points. She clung to him and asked, now that she had changed, he would not leave. Li pressed her to himself. He replied that he wanted to wait until she fell asleep and only then leave. Tin Xuan became sad, but he was leaving anyway. Shi Tianrui cursed. It was already dark. He was clearly unlucky today. If he ran into the dark race again, his glasses wouldn't be enough, and the dark race will soon fall into hibernation. First, we need to find other heroines, and return to Deng Ting Shuang later. Shuaiden confirmed that the owner was right. They needed to retreat. The official protagonist teleported from the Dark Tribe's forest. Li Yuan-yi covered the sleepy Deng Ting Shuang with a blanket. Hearing her quiet snoring, the guy called out the girl's name just in case. It looks like she's already fast asleep, which means she can teleport back to her village. Li used the system and teleported to the house directly from Ting Shuang Cave. He landed carefully right in the back of his house so as not to attract unnecessary attention. The guy turned his head and sighed with relief. There was no one nearby who could notice his movement. Li looked through the window of the house and saw the light. Chu Sui was still awake. He walked carefully towards the front door, trying to walk as loudly as possible. The master shouted to his slave that he had returned home. However, his teleportation was observed by Zhen Yi, who was hiding in a tree in the form of a huge green snake. She again took on the appearance of a girl and thoughtfully noted that Li Yuanyi possessed such advanced magic. The front door creaked and slammed, and Li Yuanyi found himself home again. He looked at his fragile and tender slave Ku Sui in surprise. She turned into a fox and slept in the middle of the room, curled up in a ball on the floor. Hearing footsteps, she opened her eyes and immediately began to transform into a human. The sleepy girl told her owner that he had finally returned home. He put the fish he had caught on the table and asked her why she was sleeping on the floor again. Ku Sui understood that the owner had just gone fishing. That's why he came back so late and only caught 2 fish. Weakling. The girl said that she had already prepared dinner and would bring it now. But the owner stopped her. He demanded that she answer his question first. Sui was embarrassed and stuttered as she explained that she was simply used to sleeping on the floor. Li came closer to her and said that she really liked a soft bed. Did she really think he didn't know that? The guy gently stroked his fox cub on the head. She said confusedly that she understood everything and would sleep on the bed. He patted her head and smiled. She didn't need to be afraid of him. He wouldn't eat her. The girl was confused. The owner had been acting increasingly strange lately. Yuan Yi ordered the slave to sit down and he would bring everything himself. Otherwise, she might poison him. Having said this, he headed to the kitchen for the prepared dinner. Ku Sui looked at him in surprise, wondering why his mood had suddenly changed. But then she sighed with relief. Everything was fine. He was still the same. He just became a little less perverted. Li took the plates of food. The system reported that the villain Ku Sui's sympathy had increased. He received 5 points. The guy was stunned. He understood less and less what was going on in this girl's head. Duden was happy. The owner is doing great. When he gets 150 points, the store will be upgraded. Li smiled. He didn't know why, but his confidence was simply off the charts. The owner told Kusue to sit down to eat right now. Otherwise, she would get what she deserved. She obediently sat down at the table. Lee told her to finish everything. He can't stand it when one of his loved ones goes hungry. The surprised girl quietly replied that everything was clear to her. Zhen Yi secretly watched Li Yuanyi, peering into the window of his house without being noticed. Li cursed. The place where Deng Tingshuang had bitten itched unbearably, and he scratched his neck. Kusue looked at her master questioningly. Noticing the wound on his neck, she jumped up, slamming her hands on the table. She carefully touched the bite site, which was slightly red from scratching. The girl indignantly asked Li Yuanyi. So he was marked, he noticed. It seems she was angry. Sui asked, "It seems to be a dark race." "That's right. This smell can't be confused with anything." Li played dumb and said they grabbed him and bit him once. Then he ran away and asked if this mark was dangerous. She explained that if someone from the dark race marked him, they would definitely force him to mate. The guy grimaced. The young fox hit the nail on the head. The girl walked around the room for a long time, then stopped and looked straight at her master. She said that they needed to run, to go where the dark race couldn't reach him. If they set their sights on him, he will be their breeding machine until they squeeze everything out of him. Lee calmly picked up his chopsticks and was about to start eating dinner. He was hungry. He calmly asked the fox, "But then he would be free, wouldn't he?" Kusue looked at her owner in bewilderment, surprised by his calmness after the bite. She sheepishly said that she simply didn't want the people close to her to suffer. Du Din detected strong emotions in Kusue, but he couldn't tell whether it was sympathy or obsession. Lee said to the slave with a smile. He sees how she betrayed him and is very happy about it. But first, she needs to sit down and eat. Sui was silent. Lee added that he had been fishing all day and was very tired. They would talk about the mark tomorrow. The guy decided that he needed to calm her down. She should under no circumstances suspect anything about Deng Tingshuang. It was deep night and time to go to bed. Li Yuanyi blew out the candle in his bedroom, trying not to wake his little fox. She curled up on his bed and fell asleep peacefully. The guy relaxed a little. It seemed like Kusue had finally calmed down. He lightly stroked her fluffy red fox fur. Li was delighted. She was so soft and pleasant, it was simply impossible to stop. By the way, he has never turned into a wolf before. I wonder if his fur will be stiff. Feeling the owner's hands, the fox woke up. She was confused. Where he was going? Lee thought, this is, of course, a bit vulgar. But he is the owner. Why not take advantage of the moment? Kusue mentally asked her master not to touch the base of her tail. She began to shake. The fox clutched the sheet with a trembling paw, overcome with emotion. She felt that just a little more and something strange would start to happen to her. Well, no need. Stop stroking her. And the unsuspecting guy continued to gently stroke his fluffy fox. The girl moaned that she really couldn't contain herself anymore. She raised her muzzle and suddenly let out a piercing howl. Lee asked her in surprise what had happened, whether she was ill or whether he had accidentally hurt her. And then a message came that the sympathy of the villainous Kusue had increased. Lee received 50 points as a reward. Dudin exclaimed that the owner had accumulated 150 points, and now a new level of the system store had opened. The guy immediately opened the system window to see the new options. The store was updated to the second level. The system reported that new products had been added and invited Lee to go shopping. The fox stood up and came closer to her owner. She thought that she was going crazy, but it was so warm next to him. He stroked her fluffy fur, and the fox thought that at least today she would sleep, snuggled up to him. Lee gently ran his hand through her fur and quietly told the baby to sleep peacefully. Under the gentle hand of her owner, the little fox quickly fell asleep. The night passed surprisingly calmly. The sky began to brighten. Morning was coming. Very soon, the sun would rise and a new day would begin. Lee opened his eyes, trying to figure out where he was. In his dorm or in the novel? He heard someone snoring next to him, and it turned out that it was Kusue, snoring peacefully. The guy thought that when Kusue was sleeping, she seemed so cute and quiet. He carefully adjusted her hair, which had fallen over her face during her deep sleep. Sui said that she was going to work outside the village with the other slaves, and he needed to go to his old age and tell him about moving. She knew that if the dark race had their eye on Lee, his life would be in danger until they moved. Lee didn't know what to do if he left, Ting Shuang would start to get worked up, and if he refused, Sui's sympathy would collapse. The guy sighed heavily. How difficult it is with these women. Li thought about it, and Dowden was sure that the owner would definitely find the perfect solution. He paced back and forth for a long time and finally stopped, needing to talk to Ku Sui again. After all, moving is a serious matter. You can't decide everything in the heat of the moment. On this day, the village slave girls worked outside the settlement in the orchard. Ku Sui, along with other slave girls, was busily collecting fruits into a shoulder basket. Shi Tianrui watched her. He decided that today he had to raise Chu Sui's sympathy towards him. The official protagonist decided to start by acquiring something as impressive as possible. He spent 2 points to purchase a pearl set, which gave him a noticeable increase in charisma. Having dressed up, Tianrui headed towards the girl, who was already quite tired from work. Suddenly, she heard someone call out to her, calling her Miss Ku Sui. Shi Tianrui said to the fox that she had collected so many fruits. Wasn't it heavy for her? And offered to help her carry them. The girl looked questioningly at the stranger, not understanding who he was and why his face was so shiny. She replied that this was slave work, and if it was taken away from her, she would have no place to show herself at all. The girl advised the gentleman to mind his own business and not to worry about her. Tianrui didn't understand anything. These clothes give a bonus to charisma. Why doesn't it work on her? Maybe she's just embarrassed. The protagonist decided that he was too dazzling. At that moment, Li noticed their conversation. The guy got a little angry. That idiot Tianrui decided to steal his girlfriend. Li grinned. Unlike Tianrui, he had managed to study his slave. He activated the mode of a deprived boy in love. Li Yuanyi called out to Ku Sui, and the girl and her companion looked at the guy questioningly. And Li said to Sui, slightly offended since they were already helping her, it meant that he was clearly superfluous here. Tianrui grimaced. What was he doing here? It didn't matter. An ordinary loser was no match for a hero. Li sighed, saying that he wouldn't bother them and would go. He had come for nothing. He was so worried about Sui. She grabbed Li by the sleeve and said that she had already packed everything and wanted to go back with him. Her sympathy grew again. Li Yuanyi took her basket filled with the picked fruits. He suggested that he would carry the basket and dinner from it, and that it should be tasty, and the fox immediately agreed. The guy mentally told Tianrui that even if he was the real protagonist, he would still beat him. Shi Tianrui was stunned by surprise. How was this possible? Why did she leave with this idiot? The official protagonist was angry. This trash Li Yuanyi began to irritate him greatly. On the way home, Ku Sui told Li to be careful with the guy who was approaching her. He knew perfectly well that she was a slave, and yet he stared at her openly, his thoughts clearly impure. The guy replied with a smile that he understood her warning, and she also asked him not to behave like he did in the garden again. Li asked how exactly, she explained. Well, so weakly, if the men from the tribe saw, they would despise him even more. He realized that she was talking about his special, charming regime. Li Yuanyi stopped his slave with a smile and hugged her. The guy asked her, "It seems she is not so afraid of him anymore." The girl was embarrassed. What is he doing? Others can see them. Li said he didn't care what anyone thought of him. No one respected him here anyway. He just wanted to pay her back what he owed her. The girl flushed and said, "He is the master and she is the slave. He doesn't owe her anything." She thought that the owner had really changed, that he had really been knocked off his feet that time. Her sympathy had grown even more. The guy looked very intently at his cute and graceful fox. He thought she was just one of the heroines to be conquered in this book. But she was the cutest. Li smiled kindly at the gentle beauty. He told Ku Sui that she should smile more often. She had a very beautiful smile. Even if one day he was not around. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. Her previous owner definitely couldn't have said such a thing. She suddenly lowered her eyes and blushed with embarrassment. The girl hurriedly said that it was time for them to go home for dinner. Li suggested that he cook today and make her milk-fish soup. But the girl mumbled, asking why he was so concerned. Tianrui watched them go. He realized that if he didn't get rid of this character, Chu Sui might never change his attitude. This guy is most likely also a time traveler, Shuaiden told the owner. If they really are a time traveler, everything is very bad. Shuai Ding told the master that they needed to act quickly. If Li Yuanyi subdued the villainess first, they would be finished. Shi Tianrui said, "Winter is coming. It's time for some dark race women to find a mate." Shuiden asked the owner what he had in mind. Tianrui remembered when he read the novel. There was one minor NPC, a woman from the dark race. Give her a drop of hope and she will do all the dirty work for Tianrui. He decided to use someone else to remove the one who was supposed to die within the first 3 pages and return the plot to normal. At Li Yuanyi's house, the master and his slave were about to have dinner. The guy was carrying a bowl of soup and was offering the girl to try it when he was suddenly attacked. Li cursed and turned around abruptly, the bowl of soup flying to the floor. An unfamiliar woman from a dark tribe appeared out of nowhere in his house with the clear intention of killing him. And although the guy dodged, the warrior prepared to attack him again. Suddenly, a young fox stood in her way, shielding her owner with her body. The claws of the uninvited guest left deep cuts on Kusui's delicate hand. The girl swayed and began to fall from the damage she had received. Li Yuanyi picked up the girl, noticing that Kusui was injured. She asked the owner if this was the same woman of the dark race who had marked him. He answered negatively. The dark race woman declared that Li Yuanyi must die tonight. Only if he dies will she have a chance to survive in this world. Shi Tianrui promised her that if she killed Li Yuanyi, he would make her his slave and give her status. He explained that if only a human or beast man could acknowledge it, the dark race would be able to free itself from its shackles. The woman doubted whether Tianrui was lying, but he assured her that he needed her help. So why would he deceive her? Inspired by such wonderful prospects, the woman rushed into battle again. Despite the wound, Kusui tried to protect her master and took another blow. A woman from the dark tribe kicked the girl. The fox couldn't withstand the attack and flew out into the street, breaking the front door with her body. Zhen Yi, seeing the attack, was surprised that the dark race dared to openly appear in the wolf tribe like that. A clot of magical power swirled in the palm of the uninvited guest. She was about to finish off the guy. Li's eyes flashed, and a clot of fire magic began to swirl in his hand as well. The dark woman was taken aback. Shi Tianrui assured her that this Li Yuanyi was a weakling. The blow sent the woman from the dark tribe flying out of the house into the yard, breaking down the remains of the door. The wounded forest warrior fell onto the courtyard flagstones, blood gushing from her mouth. Li Yuanyi clenched his fists and ran out of the house after her. He dealt the dark tribe forest dweller another blow to prevent further attacks. The boy's blow was so strong that the stone pavement of the courtyard cracked and the stones flew apart. Zhen Yi chuckled, wondering how many more surprises Li Yuanyi was hiding from her. Li flew out into the courtyard after his opponent, flashes of magical power still swirling around him. He stepped on the stomach of a woman from the dark tribe who suddenly attacked him in his own home. Chu Sui was stunned. She didn't even know that her master was capable of fighting at such a level. The guy menacingly asked the defeated enemy who sent her here to kill him. The woman remained silent. She realized that the villagers would kill her anyway. Li Yuanyi's palm glowed, and he threateningly directed magic at the captive. But she still remained silent. The guy waved his hand and blood gushed from the warrior's throat. He concluded that if she was silent, then she was of no use to him anymore. And it was time for her to die for her insolence. Chu Sui watched her master in surprise. He had truly changed beyond recognition. Li sat down next to her and asked with concern if she had been hurt anywhere else besides her hand. But the fox was worried about something completely different. She asked her owner when he had managed to learn all this. The guy was a little confused about how to answer her so as not to arouse suspicion. He can't say that he just learned this by buying equipment from the system's store. Li lied. The last time he was kidnapped by the dark race, he learned something at a critical moment. Chu Sui was stunned. How did he learn this? It turns out that her master is a genius in martial arts. This was quite strange because everyone in the tribe considered Li Yuanyi a useless blockhead. Zhen Yi chuckled upon hearing this. Oh well, even the weakest of the dark race could only be defeated by a second-level warrior. She knew perfectly well that such techniques could not be simply understood. And this Kusui, even though she was wounded, she is clearly not weak. Zhen Yi realized that the girl's potential was limitless. It seemed that her inner core was sealed. The snake girl stopped near this village to heal her wounds, and did not expect to meet such interesting people here. Then the village elder appeared with his warriors and asked what the noise was and what had happened. Li Yuan-yi replied to Uncle Su that this woman from the dark race had infiltrated the village and wanted to kill him and Ku Sui. The elder was surprised. The dark race? How dare they even enter here? The warrior reported to the head of the village that the woman was dead. Su Fu asked who killed this impudent woman. Li replied that he did it. The elder didn't believe it. He couldn't even lift a bucket of water. But Li objected. Now what was more important was how she got here. Most likely, Tianrui had something to do with it. Li took Ku Sui away, and if he didn't want the system to erase him, he had to strike. Ku Sui told the village chief that there was apparently a traitor in the village, and it was he who brought one of the dark race here. Shu Fu knew that winter was coming. They had no time for forays now. They would soon have to hibernate, unless someone generously paid them. He asked Li Yuan-yi who the boy had crossed. Li pretended to be a fool and said, "Is the elder really serious now?" No one here takes him seriously. Ku Sui reminded the owner about the guy who recently approached her. She thinks it was his doing. The elder was surprised to hear the girl's story. This is a serious violation of the rules. What is his name? Sui said. Shi Tianrui. The head remembered. It seemed like there was someone like that. He had recently shown up and asked to stay. He ordered them to bring him. A couple of minutes later, the warrior brought Shi Tianrui to the elder. As he passed the square, the official protagonist saw the body of the dark race woman he had dispatched being carried away. The elder told him that Li Yuan-yi suspected that she was plotting to assassinate him, and that he would say something in his defense. She bowed to the headman and replied that if there were doubts, then evidence was needed. Why force someone to justify themselves without evidence? Su Fu agreed that the young master's words were reasonable. He spoke sensibly and held himself with dignity. She said that he was new here, but he heard that Li Yuan-yi was lazy and worthless, and was incapable of anything other than beating his slave. He was recently dragged away by the dark race, and suddenly he returned on his own. I wonder why he remained safe and sound. Li replied that he returned because he knew how to fight, and he was lucky. The guy realized that this was definitely Shi's doing. Ku Sui added, and the master killed one of the dark race with his own hands last night. Isn't that the best proof? The village chief asked the girl if it was true, and she confirmed that she had seen it with her own eyes. Then, Shi Tianrui saw teeth marks on Li Yuan-yi's neck. He shouted to the village chief that Li had a mark of the dark race on his neck. To be marked and still survive, isn't that suspicious? Shi Tianrui chuckled to himself. This loser decided to compete with him. Nothing will come of it. Li sighed. He wanted to persuade Ku Sui to stay a little longer, but now if he stayed here, things would only get worse. He told Uncle Shu that he himself wanted to tell him everything. He and Ku Sui were planning to move to Yangshan to get away from the dark race. Yes, he was indeed marked. He barely escaped alive. If he stayed here, that woman from the dark race would find him. Su Fu was worried. Yuan Yi grew up here but didn't learn any craft. How was he going to survive in Yangshan City? Li said that he had already decided everything. They don't know who ordered the murder of him and Sui. No one here believes him, so there is no need to convince them otherwise. Shi Tianrui frowned. He didn't expect this turn of events. Unable to contain himself, the official protagonist shouted that Li Yuan-yi and Ku Sui were not allowed to leave. Shi still hasn't reached Dengting Shuang, and if Chu Sui leaves, he won't have achieved anything at all these days. The village chief remarked that it was their decision. So what did Shi Tianrui have to do with all this? Shi stated that the matter of Li Yuan-yi and the dark race has not yet been clarified, and it is quite possible that he is simply escaping responsibility. Li replied that just as he had no evidence that Shi wanted to kill him, he had no evidence that he had conspired with the dark race. Besides, if Li had cooperated with them, why would they have attacked him? And why would he have killed that woman? Shuai Ding cursed and informed Shi that a sharp increase in Ku Sui's obsession had been detected. The assistant shouted at the owner to end the conversation immediately, change the subject, and act carefully. Shuai Ding reminded Shi that there was also a villain to capture in Yanshan. They still needed to go there. Tianrui snorted in irritation and said, "Whatever happens, I don't care." Clenching his fists, The official protagonist left the village square. Lee smiled to himself. Now he didn't have to worry that the protagonist would suddenly re-educate Ku Sui, and the fox was sure that the strange guy was up to something. Yuan Yi told the chief that he had known him for a long time, and betraying the village was too much. They needed to pack their things. Someone had set him up. They needed to leave. Su Fu was worried about the boy and asked him to live in Yangshan like a human being. Get rid of his bad habits and get on the right path. Li Yuanyi and Chu Sui returned to their home, which was half destroyed after the attack. The girl sighed heavily. Li told her not to be upset. They were moving anyway. But the little fox felt sorry for the house in which she had lived for so many years. The guy reminded her that she never liked it here anyway. So let her think that she would start her life with a clean slate. He took her hand and led her. She no longer tried to pull her hand out of his. Li told the girl with a smile that they would have a new house in the city. Much better than this one. Ku Sui asked in surprise if the owner would really be able to buy a house in a new location. He confirmed, and this will be their home. They will do everything there the way they want. The guy fell tiredly onto the bed and suggested that Ku Sui go to bed early today. The girl glanced warily at the doorway and asked what to do with the broken door. Li smiled. They have nothing to steal. She's the only thing that thieves might want. The owner patted the bed and said that if the girl wanted, they could sleep together. They can sleep simply like a man with a woman. He will not touch her. Anyway, they are leaving tomorrow. This is their last night here. He extended his hand to her and said that if Ku Sui was shy, she could take on her beast form. The girl timidly gave him her hand and warned that if the gentleman dared to raise his hands, she would fight. Li reminded her that in all these years he had never even touched her, and she could trust him on that at least. The fire in the lamp crackled quietly. The girl thought about it and agreed to lie down next to it. They wished each other good night, and Sui turned away from her master. Ku Sui lay silently in thought. She remembered the last few days, how her strange master had behaved towards her. A blush appeared on her cheeks. She suddenly realized that she had become very attached to him over these days. But she was still afraid. She suddenly turned to him and looked closely at the guy's handsome face. The girl told Li Yuanyi that if he continued to treat her well, then she would live with him for real. He raised his head and told her that she didn't need to force herself. Du Din exclaimed enthusiastically. The change in Ku Sui's sympathy level has been recorded. The reward is 100 points. 4 out of 5 stars are already lit, and there is very little left until complete victory. The system assistant exclaimed, oh my God, master, well said. Li suggested that the fox consider that they had met again. He would no longer treat her the same way before. On behalf of that former Li Yuanyi, he asked her for forgiveness, and the girl was taken aback with surprise. The girl said nothing, only hugged his hand and pressed herself trustingly against him. Hiding her face in his shoulder, she sheepishly replied that she agreed. Li looked at the cute little fox and thought, what a strange life. He once dreamed of meeting this heroine. The guy smiled slightly. There was only one gray heart left. I needed to push harder. Sui didn't notice how she fell asleep. Feeling movement next to her, she opened one eye. The girl shuddered. The owner was looking straight at her. His face was so close that she could feel his breath. She said embarrassedly that yesterday she fell asleep so quickly that she didn't even understand how. Li replied with a smile. It's okay. It's warmer together. But it was time for him to get up, and the fox was upset. Li Yuan told her to pack her things for now, and when he returned, he would help her. She wondered where he was going so early. Could it be that something really urgent had come up? The guy explained that they were leaving for Yangshan soon and needed to fill out the paperwork and stock up on provisions for the journey. Li gently stroked Ku Sui's head, asking her not to worry in vain. He smiled at his beautiful fox and told her to wait for him at home. He would be back soon. Li Yuanyi quietly walked out of the house and carefully looked around. After making sure that no one was watching him, he walked along the road towards the forest. But Zhen Yi was watching him in the form of a large snake. She was surprised. The guy was leaving the village again. Shouldn't he be packing his things at home now? The snake followed and saw that Li Yuan, just like last time, suddenly disappeared, as if he had dissolved into thin air. The girl was perplexed. This is a very high-level technique. Where did he even learn it? The predator licked her lips. If she eats it, this convenient technique will become hers. They are going to Yangshan. Great! Jen has almost recovered. She will stop by there on the way. She needs to visit anyway. Using teleportation, Li instantly moved to the Dark Tribe's forest. He stopped at the entrance to Deng Tingshuang Cave and needed to prepare for the meeting. The boy called out to Tingshuang affectionately, loudly announcing that he had arrived, bringing with him a basket of meat worth 5 points. The girl ran into her beloved, sneaking up from behind. She was so glad that he came, and immediately asked how his wound was. Seeing a whole basket of meat, she happily asked if he would hibernate with her. She missed him so much. Li suggested that she enter the cave. She would soon go into hibernation, and he was afraid that she would not have enough food. So he brought her a supply. He was also bored, but wolves do not hibernate. His wounds are serious, and he needs to go in search of a healer. Deng Tingshuang stopped and frowned. She angrily asked her lover where he was going to go. Li really hoped that he could deceive Tingshuang, but she was too perceptive. He sighed and put the basket with the winter supply of meat on the floor. Approaching the beauty, the guy took her trembling hands in his and began to explain his actions. He specifically wanted to get cured while she was in hibernation, Li reminded Tingshuang. He swore that he would not abandon her and would keep his word. The beauty answered with a sigh. She was still worried about him. You never know what could happen. Li hugged her. He knew what she had been through. Mistrust was a way to protect oneself, and he didn't blame her for doubting. Dudin stated that his sympathy for Deng Tingshuang was slowly growing. Just a little more, and the first heart would light up. The guy explained that now he is an ordinary person, but in order to remove the curse of the dark race from her, he needs to become stronger. Just call Tingshuang and he will be there. Their hearts are already connected. Besides, has he ever deceived her? Li sighed. He was a real scoundrel. He was ready to do anything for the sake of the task. His assistant asked him not to turn on his conscience for the sake of survival. Deng Tingshuang asked Li to do what he did back then again before he left. The guy's jaw dropped in surprise. He didn't expect this, but Tingshuang's eyes sparkled with love, and she looked at him so pleadingly. Li flushed. Was she really offering him a bed right to his face? Who would refuse that anyway? Of course, the guy couldn't refuse his incredibly beautiful villain. He picked her up in his arms and warned her that it was just a massage, nothing more. Tingshuang's face flushed and she nodded happily. The girl agreed to everything. Li Yuanyi returned to the village only late in the evening. Entering the empty doorway, he shouted to Ku Sui that he had returned with the spoils. The girl greeted her returning owner with a smile. She cheerfully said that she was almost finished getting ready too, so they would be able to set out soon. Li placed on the table the fish and birds he had caught, which he could take with him on the road. He stroked the fox and said tenderly, "She's probably tired, poor thing. Even her hair is disheveled." Ku Sui looked at her master in surprise. Suddenly, she rushed towards him and pressed herself against the surprised guy's chest. The girl whispered that the gentleman should not be so kind to her. She was afraid that he would start to become attached to him. He hugged her lightly, pulling her closer and closer to him. At the entrance to the village, an elder was waiting for the travelers. He told Li that Yangshan was not like their wilderness. There were a lot of people there, and even more eyes. Sui Fu warned him to keep his eyes open there, Li's parents having left early, leaving the boy in his care. Li hugged Uncle Shu and said that he understood everything and was grateful for his wise guidance and care. The elder sheepishly told the boy not to stick to him. He was already an adult. Su Fu told Yuan Yi that if suddenly things didn't work out, he could come back. There would always be a piece of bread for him. Li told the fox that his uncle was like family to him, and that he should try to visit him more often. These words greatly surprised Ku Sui, but Li understood that if it weren't for the care of Uncle Su Fu, his hero might not have lived to see this day. 2 days later, the travelers found themselves near a huge, beautiful waterfall in the middle of a dense forest. Li placed his travel bag on the rocky ground and suggested making a stop there. He noticed that it was a bit stuffy today, and there was a waterfall ahead. He suggested that Ku Sui take a swim while he collected some firewood and made a fire. The girl was surprised. It was better for her to do such things and let the gentleman bathe. Li told her to stop acting like a servant. They had already left the tribe. Now they are a family. Ku Sui's eyes widened in surprise and she stared silently at her master. She looked down and blushed, repeating in confusion that they were now a family. Li sent her out for a swim again. He had already looked around the area. There was no one here. She didn't have to be afraid. Sui looked after the gentleman with loving eyes, unable to utter a word. Dudin was delighted. No matter what the owner did, the fox's sympathy grew. Lee grinned. The world will not save itself. While the boy was walking around in circles looking for firewood, someone was watching him closely. Lee asked Dudin if he thought the forest here was too dense. The assistant remembered that they had a villainess named Ruan Lingju from the forest people. She lived in places like this. The guy didn't go specifically to her domain. But what if it was them? He's lucky. As always. Dudin began scanning to check the villain's coordinates and their own. System Assistant Lee was shocked. They were indeed in Ruan Lingju's territory. At this moment, a strong vine with sharp thorns was already flying towards Li Yuanyi. Before the boy could even gasp, his entire body was wrapped in a green plant rope. After binding Li Yuanyi's arms and legs, the vine quickly lifted him into the air and hung him on a tree. Hanging upside down, the guy thought bitterly. And as soon as he opened his mouth, he remembered that Lingju was partial to appearances. On the outside, she looked white and fluffy, but on the inside, she was a completely different person. If she doesn't like Lee, it means there's something wrong with his face. The official protagonist is a handsome man of the highest order. Lee sighed. It seemed he had already lost this round. Dudin objected, but the owner's charisma was off the charts. Then Li Yuanyi noticed that an unusual glow had appeared among the forest thickets. Soon he saw the forest beauty Ruan Lingju in front of him. The girl's golden-green eyes flashed, and she said with a smile, "So, we've caught a wolf cub. There have been no living creatures in this forest for a long time. Silence has reigned here for too long." Li remembered that Ruan Lingju had been sealed by the high priest of the forest people, which meant that the body in front of him was not her real body. The book said that the girl was sleeping. The forest beauty asked the captive what his name was. He introduced himself. The question surprised him. The name of the food never matters. Isn't she going to eat him? She sniffed and noticed that the guy smelled good, and probably tasted good too. Yuanyi was horrified. What kind of maniac even asks the name of her food? She's definitely crazy. The girl slowly repeated the guy's name, Li Yuanyi, and thought about something. She turned sharply, clearly about to leave. As she flew away, she shouted to the captive that she would return for him. At that very second, the strong, thorny vine weakened, releasing the boy to freedom. He fell under a tree and yelped in pain as he hit the ground hard. Kusui looked at this strange scene with bewilderment, not understanding what was going on. She asked her master what had happened here, why he was tied hand and foot with that liana. Lee sighed and informed his companion that they had just encountered the forest people. Kusue noticed that the aura here was very cold and oppressive. The girl said seriously that they needed to urgently change the location of their camp. Half a month later, the travelers entered the large city of Yangshan, where beastmen live mixed with people. They walked along the busy streets and looked around with interest. Lee exclaimed with delight at what a lively place it turned out to be. Kusui sighed. Her homeland was even bigger, but now it was destroyed. The guy stroked her head and asked her not to be sad, promising that he would help her rebuild her home. In the original novel, with the help of the time traveler Shi Tianrui, she restored the Fox clan and became the new empress. Sui noticed that Li seemed to know what she had been through, and the guy mentally promised that he would do everything much better than Tianrui. Li said, confused, that he had simply assumed this. He cursed silently. He had talked too much, and he could get caught. He told the girl that he used to be a real jerk, but now, looking back, he realized how hard it had been for her all this time. Kusui sometimes felt like her master was no longer the same as he used to be. Li Yuanyi objected. He is still the same. People just grow up. But now he is a little scared. He understood that Kusui had suffered so many years of bullying from the previous Li Yuanyi, and her intuition was now sharper than a knife. The girl said with a smile that in any case she hoped that he would always be like this and would not change anymore. Lee assured her that he would not be the same old freak again and suggested that she first find a place to stay. The fox smiled. They don't have to look for anything. They already have a place to live. They approached a very large and beautiful house, similar to a small palace. Kusui took hold of the ring and confidently knocked on the gate. A surprised female voice was heard. She wasn't expecting guests today. Having opened the gate, The warlike fox was stunned. She could not believe that a princess stood before her. Li knew that Aunt Chun was Ku Sui's mother's personal servant, devoted to her with all her heart. And in the novel, she was a truly great warrior. Chun's tears welled up and she hugged the girl, whispering, "Oh, heavens, I never thought I would live to see the day when I see you again." The girl said that after that incident, she was sold to a wolf tribe. Chun was stunned. Could the princess really have been sold into slavery? How much she had suffered. The girl smiled. Now it's all over, she's free. The woman looked at Li suspiciously. And who is he? He is definitely from the wolf tribe. The guy was embarrassed. What an awkward situation after all. He was the person who tormented Ku Sui in the wolf tribe. The girl explained that this was her master. Li objected that it was in the past. Now they were like one family. The adult fox looked at the wolf boy standing in front of her with distrust. She invited the princess to come into her room. Sui was surprised. Her aunt still remembered her promise. Li realized that Aunt Chun clearly didn't like him. The 2 floors above look a bit simple for a princess. But there are 2 more levels underground, where there is more space. All these years, Chun was afraid to stick her head out, lest trouble happen. But she always waited for the princess. She took the girl to her room. Chu Sui asked her aunt if it was okay for Li Yuanyi to live next to her. But Chun didn't like the idea. The princess assured the warrior that he treated her well and that there was no need to worry. Li felt awkward from these words. Chun said, "Okay, let him live in the next room. It's not cleaned, but that's his concern." Li replied that he can handle it. She smiled at the princess, promising that she would buy wine and food, and that they would have a feast that evening in honor of her return. Aunt Chun went about her business, and the travelers headed to their rooms. Ku Sui promised to help the master clean up, but Li objected. No need. He could handle it himself. The girl stepped towards him. She reminded him that he had given her back her freedom, and cleaning her room was the least she could do for him. Li Yuanyi agreed. After all, girls are better at it. Since Ku Sui was sold, she had never returned to Yangshan, and she noticed that everything had changed so much here. She suggested that they go for a walk around the city after dinner. Li agreed. It was a great idea. They would go wherever she wanted. Suddenly, Dudin shouted to the owner, "Trouble. The level of obsession with Deng Tingshuang is growing sharply." The guy asked in surprise what was going on there. Chu Sui asked if something was wrong, but Li replied with a smile that nothing. He just needed to go to the toilet. He shouted to the princess that they would be back soon and rushed into the next room. Li walked quickly. He felt that something had happened in the cave. As he walked, he ordered Dudan to locate Deng Tingshuang's coordinates. The system assistant did everything and quickly teleported the owner to the entrance of the cave. It seemed to the guy that the second of teleportation lasted an eternity. Finding himself in the forest of the Dark Tribe, Li Yuanyi looked around. He realized that there had apparently been a fight here. Dudin shouted and quickly went inside. But before the guy could run into the cave, Deng Tingshuang was thrown out from there by a strong blow. Li Yuanyi quickly got his bearings and caught the girl. She was all wounded. Someone had clearly attacked her right in her cave. The blow was strong, and Li Yuanyi and Tingshuang fell to the ground. The guy quickly got up and examined the girl. She had been badly injured in the fight. Li quickly asked Tingshuang what was wrong, and she barely audibly told him to run away. At that moment, 3 warriors from the Dark Tribe appeared on the threshold of the cave. The women cried out, "Look, the little wolf cub came by himself, white, tender, and smells delicious. Winter is already approaching. They will take turns having fun with him, get pregnant, and then use his carcass for dried meat for the winter." Deng Tingshuang told Li to leave her and run away. He couldn't defeat them. They would eat him. Dudin shouted to the owner, "Tinshuan's obsession is growing rapidly. She needs to be calmed down urgently." The guy told Tinshuan to rest and he would figure it out. The girl was surprised at what he was going to do. He stated that no one dares to touch his family with impunity. The skill that Li had recently purchased for a huge amount of points came in handy again. Deng Tingshuang was stunned. Did he really consider her his family? The girls from the Dark Tribe looked greedily at the young greyhound cub. They were sure that they would take him alive, and all 3 of them would have a lot of fun with him. Li Yuanyi waited calmly for the enemies to approach, seemingly doing nothing. But in reality, He opened the game panel and quickly activated his 50-point combat skill. Li Yuan's fists sparkled with fiery golden magical energy. The strongest of the girls rushed to attack Li, shouting for the wolf cub to go to his sister. But the guy replied that she was not his sister and dealt her a crushing blow. The other two were stunned by what it was. Seeing their sister's serious injury, the other two frowned. They no longer wanted to take the boy prisoner. They asked what it was, but were still convinced that he was just lucky and that he was going to die now. Li noticed that they were talking too much, which he didn't like. The boys struck the remaining two sisters, slamming them into the stone wall of the cave. Deng Tingshuang became silent, looking at her man's flaming fists. Until now, she was sure that he was weak and she had to protect him. Li stated that he does not beat women, but if they touched his family, he would find them even at the ends of the earth. He asked if the strong devours the weak, as if that was how it was done in their dark tribe. The boy directed a stream of fire towards the sisters, saying that they could only hope that they would have better luck in the next life. He approached Tin Xuan and said that he would take her to the cave and heal her wounds. Du Din was delighted. Deng Tingshuang's sympathy was growing at a furious speed. The beauty pressed herself against her hero's chest, her sympathy immediately reaching 3.5 notches. The system assistant congratulated the owner. He immediately received 200 points. Li Yuan-yi carefully picked up the injured girl and carried her into the cave. Putting his hand behind his back, he quietly took out the medical supplies from the storage room. He warned her that he would now stop the bleeding and treat her wounds. The beauty looked with wide eyes at the unusual guy, still not believing that she was still alive. Suddenly, she leaned forward sharply and pressed her lips to his, and he flinched in surprise. And although the iodine stung her wounds, she pulled at his cloak, trying to take it off. Li stopped the girl. First, the wounds need to be properly treated, otherwise they will increase in size. But Tin Xuan was all ablaze. She cried out that she could not bear it any longer. The guy sternly told her that she needed to calmly undergo treatment, which she didn't understand. She was taken aback by such severity, but Li gently took her hand and continued to treat the wounds. He noticed that hibernation was just around the corner, but she was still wounded. While she is hibernating, he will visit her every 2 days. She can just sleep and not worry about anything. The girl's eyes became sad. She asked if he was leaving again. He answered that winter was coming. His tribe was stocking up on provisions. If there is heavy snow, trade routes will be inaccessible. He cannot put everyone at risk for personal reasons. The girl lowered her head sadly. Li told her that if he were selfish, he would have abandoned his fellow tribesmen for her today. But then tomorrow he could leave her for something else, and that would be wrong. Ting Xuang was lost in thought, and Li felt that in order to conquer the villain, he himself turned into a villain and always lied. He asked the beauty not to cry and not to hurt him. After treating all of Deng Tingshuang's wounds, Li screwed the iodine bottle back on and put it away in storage. The guy promised her that he would definitely return to his beauty. She took his hand and sadly asked if he was really leaving already. Maybe he would stay with her today. His heart sank. He paused, then agreed to wait until she fell asleep. Li told the girl that it was too dark at night and the forest was full of dangers, so it would be difficult for him to return. She whispered that she didn't want to hibernate, that she wouldn't be able to see him for 3 whole months. Li promised that someday he would take her to a place where there was no need to hibernate, where it was warm all year round, and then they would always be close. As she fell asleep, she muttered that this would be very good. Li thought that no matter how much he lied, it was absolutely true that he would take her to warmer climes. He carefully laid the sleeping mistress of the cave on the mat. After making sure she was asleep, Li told Dudan to teleport him back to the house in Yangshan. As he disappeared, Li glanced back once more at the sleeping, still unconquered villainess. A moment later, the guy found himself back in a luxurious townhouse in Yangshan. Looking at himself, he cursed. After the fight, he was covered in dirt. He needed to get himself in order urgently. Li sighed. He was afraid that Chu Sui would notice the dirt and become suspicious. At that very moment, his gaze met the angry gaze of the Fox Princess. Chu Sui stood on the stairs. She seriously asked Li where he had been. His heart sank. He realized he was in trouble. He replied in confusion that he had not found a toilet and went out of town into the field. Li was horrified. Who could possibly believe such ridiculous nonsense? Kusue chuckled, but didn't say anything in response. She realized that he had gone out of town, but she didn't understand why he would lie. The girl said that she had cleaned the owner's room and he could take a bath and rest. Having said this, the young fox turned around and went to her chambers. Lee was surprised. She clearly didn't believe him, but she didn't try to find out the real reason for his absence. He was terrified. He was finished. These were only 2 villains, and there were 7 of them in total. His endurance would not be enough. Dudin explained that if one were to be subdued, it would no longer be consumed by the darkness. And while Ting Shuang was in hibernation, Chu Sui could be dealt with. But the guy was worried about Shi Tianrui. He would frantically search for a new heroine, and suddenly he would show up in Yangshan. Li decided that he first needed to raise Ku Sui's sympathy to the maximum. Then Shi Tianrui would no longer be a threat. Li pushed open the door to his room and exclaimed, "Life won't live itself. It's too early for him to whine about being tired." Having thrown open the doors sharply, the guy noticed that wherever he went, he had to work hard. He fell tiredly onto the soft couch. Li was truly exhausted. He had a feeling that any moment now and health problems would start. He needed to slow down. The guy opened the store to see if there was anything to relieve the fever. He was surprised. Wow, there is even that stinking Doji and herbal snake water here. These drinks cost only 1 point, and they were unlimited. He told the assistant that he was taking both, so let him write off the points. Dudin smiled. With such a taste for drinks, the owner could achieve any goal. Li Yuanyi's eyes flashed, and he declared that he would now drink some medicinal drinks and then fight again. After everything was settled at home, Ku Sui went out with Aunt Chun to do some business almost every morning. They returned only late at night and did not say anything about their expeditions to Li Yuanyi. While the fox was gone, Li teleported to Ting Shuang several times. She had already fallen into hibernation. The 2-point purchase was returned every time. Li changed his clothes and even bought a special spray so that Ku Sui wouldn't smell anything. One day at dinner, the fox noticed that her owner had been smelling nice lately. Li replied that he had once smelled a strong odor of sweat on the street and realized that he too stank, and had since then begun to take care of himself. The guy cursed mentally. Maybe he said something wrong. Why was she looking at him so strangely? The girl noticed that it was true. The owner really did smell bad before. It was clear from his gaze that Ku Sui didn't believe him. But she still remained silent. Why did she tolerate this? She didn't believe Li's excuses. But since she hadn't yet figured out the system, she couldn't connect him with another villain. Li asked doubting when Quan Yue would return to the city. It had been more than a month since she left. The guy wanted to deal with the villainess from Yanshan, but she went to the mentor from the Phoenix clan, just so Shi Tianrui wouldn't run into her. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door of the room. Chu Sui asked Li Yuanyi if he was busy. The guy replied that he was free. He was surprised. Today, the girl returned early. The fox opened the door a little and came in. She said that she had been busy for the last few days and hadn't spent any time with him. Today was the fair, and Sui invited him to go for a walk. Li became wary. Ku Sui looked especially cute today. He decided that since he had nothing to do, he should go with her to the city fair and at the same time raise her sympathy. The guy agreed to go, but first he needed to change his clothes. It was already cold. But Ku Sui took his hand and told him that he didn't need to change his clothes. The girl took the fur cape off her hand and threw it over the guy's shoulders. She said that winter had come, so she sewed him this warm cape. He was amazed. The girl always returned so late, but found time to sew him clothes. Li hugged her and asked her to forgive him for everything that had happened before, even if he hadn't done it. The young fox's cheeks flushed and her eyes became thoughtful. She reminded her former master that the fair was about to begin. Smiling, the fragile beauty invited Li Yuanyi to go to the fair. Li thought, poor little fox, she was never really loved. He showed a little warmth and she already trusts him so much. They walked along the festive streets, decorated with bright lanterns. Everyone around was having fun, enjoying the holiday. Ku Sui held Li's hand and told him that there would be a procession tonight, and the high priestess would ride in a decorated chariot. Li was surprised. If there was a high priestess, it meant Quan Yue had returned to Yangshan. The girl said that this priestess was from the Dog clan, a disciple of the high priestess of the Phoenix clan, and her position was very high. Lee asked in confusion what was happening and why now. Sui revealed that she had approached the priestess Kuan Yue to help her regain the sealed power of the fox. She asked Lee not to be angry. She and her aunt contacted her parents' associates. The guy smiled. Why would he be angry? Lee asked Dudin if the villains could know each other, and he explained that the restriction concerned their knowledge of their connection with the master. That is, if the conquest is completed, there is no longer any fear. Or if they meet but do not know about the connection with him, everything will also be fine. The boy growled at Dudin to be more clear next time. Otherwise, he almost decided that it would be the end for him when they met. Kusui gently pulled her companion's hand. The priestess is coming. The high priestess's bearers appeared on the square. Several cannibals carried a large palanquin in which sat the high priestess Kuan Yue. Behind the translucent scarlet curtain, Lee saw the beauty's profile. She slightly pushed aside the light silk cloth and looked at the crowd of believers who greeted her. The guy realized that another villain had appeared. Kusui said that it was difficult to approach the priestess, and she particularly disliked men. Lee knew this. Kuan Yue hated all men. It would not be easy to melt her heart. The guy's eyes sparkled with excitement. The more difficult the task, the more interesting it was. During the fair, it was snowing constantly, and everyone was happy and playing around a little. Lee also took a handful of snow and made a small snowball out of it. Then he put on a cheerful Christmas cap and pretended to be Santa Claus. The two of them laughed happily together with Kusui. Suddenly, they heard a terrible roar and became alert. But soon, Lee realized that these were fireworks, and the night sky was painted with colorful, festive lights. The fox walked next to the guy and smiled blissfully. She was happy. Taking Li Yuani's hand, she said that she really enjoyed today. The guy turned to her. These were the very moments he had once dreamed of while lying in the dorm. Today, Kusui was unusually beautiful, even radiant. He smiled. How wonderful it was that he somehow miraculously ended up in this novel. Li Yuan suggested that the girl go home. She agreed. It was getting chilly. The villainess Kusui's sympathy levels skyrocketed, and Lee received a reward of 150 points. Returning home, the girl lit the fire and began preparing a bath for Yuanye. Chun, seeing this, was indignant and reminded the princess that she was now free. Auntie thought that she shouldn't personally heat the water for bathing, especially for this man. The girl smiled and said that this had already become her habit. Chun reminded her that she was a noble princess, and some backwater wolf cub was not even worthy of handing her shoes. The fox princess sent Aunt Chun to rest. They have important business in a couple of days. Chun smiled. It seemed like her little girl had fallen in love with this cute wolf cub. The girl's cheeks flushed. Nothing special. When his parents bought her, after all, they were initially looking for a wife for him. Kusui just thought that he was alone in a foreign land. At least she had Chun, her family, but the girl just felt sorry for him. Chun understood everything. At her age, people already look at men, but the males in this world can be very cunning. The fox lowered her ears in confusion and said that she would remember this. Aunt Chun yawned and said that she would go to bed. Chu Sui sat in front of the fireplace and thought about what Aunt Chun had just told her. She looked at the fire and tried to sort out the feelings that were overwhelming her. One thing she knew for sure: she liked this guy. But how did he really feel about her? The girl splashed more water into the bathing barrel. Entering the room, Lee wondered why there was such a strange, barely perceptible aroma. Dudin replied that it was pheromones. Before and after heat, beastmen emit a special smell. Chu Sui will soon become an adult. Lee was stunned. She was only 16. She was still almost a child. He cursed. She would be 17 in 2 days. Dudin reminded her that beastmen come of age at 17. Lee realized that this is why she was acting strange today, and why he was constantly drawn to her. It was because of the pheromones. The first heat lasts a whole week. Usually by the age of 17, females already have a partner who helps them through this period. Dudin praised him. The owner read it carefully. He growled, found time to agree. Even if Lee wants to help her, it's difficult. And will she be able to accept it? What if Lee ruins everything and only pushes her towards obsession? The system assistant asked what to do. The owner needs to think faster. Sui asked why Lee was frozen. It was time to bathe. After the fair, the girl felt very strange. Her heart was pounding, and she wanted something all the time. Lee told Kusui that he needed to talk to her. She asked if after swimming, the water cools down quickly in winter. He explained to the fox that in 2 days she would turn 17. The girl was surprised. It was her birthday, Lee said. No one had ever thrown her a party over the years. She probably forgot herself. The guy said carefully, "She probably knows that female beastmen start their first heat at 17. Kusui looked at her former master in surprise. She didn't know this. Now she understood why she felt so strange today. Lee noticed that she was already starting to emit pheromones, which were deadly attractive to males. He treated her badly before and doesn't want to force her or take advantage of her condition. So he has to tell her straight out. If something happens between them during her heat, he may leave a mark on her. This is a male instinct." He asked if she was listening to him, and love sparkled in the fox's eyes. She really wanted him to leave a mark on her. The fox's cheeks flushed even more intensely, and she began to breathe heavily. Suddenly, she extended her thin, graceful arms to the guy and threw herself on his neck. She pressed her lips to his, and they merged in a long kiss. Li Yuanyi had no strength to resist the passionate little female. He pressed her to himself and tenderly kissed her attractive lips. Both his and her heads were spinning. They couldn't tear themselves away from each other. Finally, Li gathered the rest of his strength and broke away from the girl. Kusui took a step closer to him. She reminded the guy that she was originally bought by his family to become his wife. Lee looked at the young, tender fox in confusion. She asked him not to look at her like that. Otherwise, she would be very embarrassed. The guy felt his heart pounding like crazy in his chest. Never before had Lee looked so seriously and for so long at a woman's face. He lightly touched his finger to the small mouth of his former slave. She clung to him again, pressing her entire fragile body against him. Lee thought in confusion. Wasn't he supposed to conquer all these villains? But why does it now seem to him as if they are conquering him with their beauty and tenderness? Suddenly, the boy realized that he was simply under the influence of pheromones emanating from the body of the young fox. He took her by the shoulders and gently pushed her away, saying, "No, you can't do that." The girl was surprised. Why not? Lee explained to her that he was not himself today because of her smell, but she took another step towards her former master. Chu Sui asked Li Yuanyi if he knew that she hated and despised him. He replied, of course he knew, but he suddenly changed. She doubted, wondered, was lost. Kusui said that she needed an answer. She timidly asked Lee if there was any sincerity in his feelings for her. Lee was confused. He suddenly remembered everything that had happened between them during this time. The guy remembered the days spent with the girl. He really liked her. Of course, to be honest, the initial goal of getting closer to her was conquest. But over time, he himself stopped understanding what was really going on between them. Lee really likes it when the young fox smiles cheerfully. And when Kusui cries or she is in pain, his chest also aches. The guy himself no longer understands whether he is simply completing a task or whether this is the beginning of truly deep feelings. He silently pressed the girl to himself, and she instinctively understood what was going on in his heart. The fox princess stepped decisively towards the one she had hated for so long. She quickly unbuttoned the bodice of the dress that Li Yuanyi had given her some time ago. The light silk dress slid off her young, elastic body. The girl told the stunned guy that he was the only one she wanted to be with. Suddenly, the usually timid Kusui gave the guy a strong push in the chest. A confused Li fell fully clothed into the water, prepared for swimming. The fox princess resolutely stepped into the water after the slightly timid wolf cub. She pressed her whole body against him, their bodies, obeying instinct, merging into one. The growing fox's things were scattered across the bathroom floor. Lee couldn't contain himself this time and became the partner of a young, beautiful woman. Everything that happened next was almost impossible to consciously correct. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes as she followed the call of nature and her heart. It all happened so quickly that Lee didn't even have time to gather his willpower and refuse. Next to him in the water was a beautiful fox hair that smelled delicious. The little fox decisively pulled off the wolf cub's clothes, which were only getting in their way. Everything swam before Lee's eyes. Now he was just a young male wolf. The clothes the fox had discarded were still lying on the floor, soaking up the water that was flowing out of the bathtub. The fox princess lowered her ears in embarrassment. All 5 stars were burning above her head. She was completely conquered. Dudin enthusiastically congratulated the owner. He conquered Ku Sui and received 1,000 points as a reward. After the victory, Li's system was raised by 2 levels at once. At the same time, the official protagonist Shi Tianrui entered the gate of Yangshan City. Suddenly, the handsome man felt that something was wrong with him. He suddenly felt ill. Tianrui clutched his heart. His system reported that the villainous Ku Sui had already been completely conquered. But not by him. The main character cursed. The fox was conquered. And what to do now? Shuaden said that not all was lost. The owner must conquer another villain, collect 3,000 points, and open a 6th-level system store. Then she will be able to obtain the forced rollback item and return the villainess to the darkness level. We need to urgently find Kuan Yue. In the morning, Li covered the sleepy fox with a blanket. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The guy thoughtfully admired the gentle, fragile beauty. Ku Sui asked Yuan Yi in fear. But he had already woken up a long time ago, he confirmed with a smile. The girl stuttered and said that she needed to go out with Aunt Chun on business today. Li reminded her that tomorrow was her 17th birthday, so he would be waiting for her at home. The fox nodded sheepishly. She was confused and didn't know how to behave now. Finally, she wrapped herself in a sheet and, muttering that she would go to her room, rushed out of Li's room. The guy looked after her in surprise, not understanding what was happening to her. When the door slammed behind Ku Sui, he sighed with relief. He had finally managed to conquer at least one heroine, although no, it was rather that he was conquered. But, oddly enough, the guy was not at all against it. He smiled blissfully and quietly said that this world, it turns out, is not so bad. But then Dudin shouted for the owner to get up. Trouble. He had detected the arrival of Shi Tianrui's system in Yangshan. Li was surprised how he was able to detect it. He explained that after conquering it, he rose to the 4th level and received such an opportunity. The guy realized that Shi Tianrui had probably come for Kuan Yue. He needed to set up an ambush near her house. Quickly dressing, Li ordered that he be moved to the residence of the priestess Kuan Yue. Dudin obeyed and instantly moved the owner to the right place. The residence of the high priestess was located in the center of the city, surrounded by large buildings. Li appeared around the corner of the residence so he could observe the enemy. The guy heard a voice and realized that there was someone very close. Shi Tianrui was indignant. They were mocking him. They didn't even let him inside the room. What nonsense. Shuai Ding reminded the hero that Kuan Yue hated men, and that going head-on wasn't the best idea. Li watched cautiously. Tianjue nervously kicked the stone and exclaimed that other time-traveling heroes go through life with the wind in their hair, but he is always unlucky. She remembered that she had scars on her body. If she used the ointment, the problem could be solved. What a hassle it was. Li realized that it seemed he couldn't get close to Chuan Yu in his male form, and Shi Tianrui had clearly been turned away. Dudin panicked. What to do? Shi is the main character. His system is more perfect, and he has the aura of a protagonist. The guy asked Dudin if there were any pills in the store that would allow you to change your gender. The assistant replied that there is a technique called Master of Transformation. Within 50 minutes, everyone will perceive him as a woman. Li asked if he could see what he looked like, and Dudin said no. This seemed suspicious to the guy, but Dudin was indignant. They were one team. They needed to trust each other. The guy apologized to the assistant and decided to buy it. It's just a pity that the duration of action is short. Dudin warned the master that when the time was up, the priestess would instantly see his true image. Li decided to try it today for reconnaissance, and he activated the effect. He asked Dudin, and Shi Tianrui recognized him. The assistant assured him, "No way." The guy smiled. Well, then we need to test the effect on him first. Li Yuanyi took a deep breath before appearing in the form of a girl. Having prepared himself, he stepped around the corner to check his opponent's reaction. Li was worried. Shi turned his head and looked in his direction. Dudin calmed his master. Suddenly, Shi Tianrui saw a charming green-eyed beauty next to him. A white outfit, blonde hair, ample breasts, a thin waist. The main character was stunned with delight. Tianrui's eyes widened and he was too excited to speak. The official protagonist mentally gasped. This is a real beauty. Shi Tianrui's nose started bleeding from the intense excitement. Li cursed silently. When a man stares at you and makes your nose bleed, It's somehow creepy. Dudan asked the owner to closely monitor his facial expression, and she thought, this girl is completely to his taste. If only there was at least one like her among the heroines he conquered. The system assistant asked Lee if he had figured out how to get closer to Kuan Yue. Lee knew that to melt her heart, he had to make her understand that not all men were like the ones she had met in her childhood. Kuan Yu has scars from her childhood, and that's the only thing she can cling to without raising suspicion. The guy bought some cream from the system store. The first step was to make the priestess empathize with Lee. Sobbing, Lee, in the guise of a young girl, asked for an audience with the high priestess Kuan Yue. The guard at the gate asked Lee what the girl's business was. The blonde beauty's face flushed and she whispered, "Better not here." Lee feigned awkwardness and muttered that the girl was embarrassed to talk about it. The security girls apparently assumed that it was again something to do with men. One of the guards invited the young beauty to follow her. The security guard advised the visitor not to be afraid and to tell the high priestess everything. She would definitely help. Kuan Yu not only performs rituals, but also secretly helps women who have been harmed by men. The guard informed Lady Kuan Yue that a girl was asking to see her, and the priestess replied, "Let her come in." The young dog once again advised the visitor to trust the high priestess. Li Yuanyi pulled back the curtain and entered under the canopy. The high priestess asked the girl to sit down. Kuan Yu asked the visitor how she could help her and suggested she have some tea first. Li thanked the high priestess and thought that she really was surprisingly gentle with women. That asshole of her father abandoned her and her mother. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't have had to go through all this. As a child, her father, blinded by his thirst for power, abandoned them. Little Kuan Yu never saw him again. The girl's mother fell seriously ill and died less than a year later. And since then, Kuan Yue has wandered alone. At the age of 8, she was bought by an old man from the monkey clan and taken into slavery. When Yue grew up, he became filled with a dirty desire for her. And one dark night, he almost raped her. But she miraculously fought back and escaped with the help of a weapon. The girl killed the rapist and was later accepted as a student by the high priestess of the Phoenix clan. Yu told the visitor that if it was hard to speak, there was no need to force yourself. You could sit here and get some mental rest. Li thought, Yue is actually a kind girl. He must save her. He needed to show Kuan Yue that there were good men in the world. Dudan reminded his master that time was short. Tears welled up in Li's eyes as he told the high priestess that it concerned a distant cousin. He runs a small shop, and she wanted to help with the trade. But at home, they forbid the girl to go out into the world and do business. The visitor sobbed. In order to keep her at home, her father planned to marry her off to a man 20 years her senior. Kuan Yue slammed her hand on the table indignantly and stood up. She exclaimed, "Outrageous! How could one treat one's own daughter like this?" The priestess pressed the girl to her chest and said, "Do not be afraid. She will not allow any father in Yangshan to force his daughter into marriage." She told the girl to return home and talk to him calmly. If he didn't change his mind, let him come again. She would stand up for her. Li's face flushed as he came face to face with the high priestess's firm chest, and he felt himself suffocating. The girl thanked the high priestess, saying that after talking with her, she felt much better. The girl handed over a jar of scar ointment that her cousin had made. Kuan Yue replied sheepishly that there was no need to give her gifts, but the girl asked to take the ointment. This was the second step that Li had planned. If the priestess decides to try it, the third step will be easier. It will become clear in a few days. Li left the jar and quickly ran out of the high priestess's chambers. She looked after him in surprise. This visitor seemed strange to Kuan Yue. She turned to the table and looked at a small jar of scar ointment. This ointment attracted her. She really wanted to get rid of old childhood scars. Li had already returned to his normal form. Dudin asked if the owner thought Yue would use that ointment for the scars. The guy replied that it depended on how much she hated men, but it was unlikely that she would reject ordinary things. Suddenly, Dudin shouted to his owner to quickly hide. Li ducked behind a tree and asked what was wrong. And it turned out that Ku Sui was approaching. That's right. She did say that she was going to Kuan Yue to discuss business, and her assistant told her not to let Li catch her eye. Ku Sui and Aunt Chun walked calmly past the tree behind which Li had disappeared. After waiting for them to move away, the guy secretly retreated from there. At this time, Zhen Yi was watching Li Yuanyi from above. She was surprised, hiding, and even talking to herself. She smiled. Li Yuanyi seems to have a lot of secrets, but a man with secrets is much more interesting. The Fox Princess and Aunt Chun settled down in the pavilion to rest while awaiting an audience with Kuan Yue. Soon a girl approached them and said that the High Priestess asked them to go inside. The attendant pointed out to the visitors 2 mats in front of the priestess's pedestal. The fox knelt down and told the High Priestess that she, Ku Sui, was asking for help in removing the seal on her body. Kuan Yue perked up. This name was familiar to her. The High Priestess asked the girl if she was a fox with the surname Ku, which meant she was the princess of the Fox clan. The girl sighed heavily and lowered her head. No more. Their clan fell many years ago. Yue asked the princess. But she wants to revive the clan, doesn't she? Ku Sui confirmed. In other words, the girl longs to avenge her parents and her enslaved people. The girl bowed to the floor and exclaimed, "Yes, she wants revenge and asks for help." The priestess warned that it was impossible to remove the seal in one day, and the journey would be painful. She advised thinking it over carefully. Ku Sui replied that no matter what the price, she was willing to pay it to regain her power. The High Priestess looked closely at the little princess. She said she needed a few days to prepare and would let me know when she was ready. Overjoyed, Ku Sui thanked the High Priestess. Li asked, doubting if there was a way to freely rehabilitate other villainesses without being caught by Ku Sui. The system assistant replied that there was a way, but it was expensive. The fee was monthly, and if the payment was late, the effect disappeared. Li frowned. Did he have to sign up for a subscription even in another world? The guy asked how much it cost. It was a look-alike doll for 100 points a month. It copies the behavior and simple reactions, answers basic questions of the villains. The doll will do for a short time, but if they start digging deeper, failure is possible. Li decided to keep the doll for a month and test it out. Today after dinner, Li decided to find an excuse to go back to his room and put the doll in his place. We need to check whether Kuan Yue has used the ointment, and we need to keep an eye on Shi Tianrui. He has already started to work. Shi is the main character. He won't think for long. He will find a solution quickly. Dudin admired the foresight of the owner. In the evening, a satisfied Ku Sui ran into Li's room and rushed towards him. She exclaimed that the High Priestess had agreed to remove her seal. Suddenly, the girl became wary. She asked in surprise why the guy smelled like the High Priestess of Kuan Yue. Li cursed mentally. He came back from Kuan Yu and didn't even change his clothes. He needed to get out of it somehow. Dudin detected negative emotions in Ku Sui and asked the owner to respond immediately. Even a completely subdued target may exhibit jealousy, which can impact the mission. The girl asked Li Yuanyi if he had gone to see Kuan Yue. Li knew she would understand if he lied outright. He would have to mix the truth with the lie. The guy lowered his head and sighed. He didn't want her to find out. The girl asked what exactly. Li said that he was trying to help Ku Sui, wanted to give her a gift and put in a good word for the girl. But Sui knows how the priestess treats men. He barely made it inside and was immediately thrown out. He was ashamed to admit to Sui that nothing worked out. It was good that everything worked out for her. The girl was amazed that he really went to the priestess alone for her sake. She hugged the wolf and asked him to forgive her for doubting him. Li mentally sighed with relief. Thank God, it was over. Evening came. The guy was getting ready to go into the city for reconnaissance. He heard that Ku Sui had already returned to her place, which meant he could summon the double doll. At that very moment, Li Yuanyi's double appeared in the middle of the room. The boy ordered the doll to cover him properly, and it obeyed its owner. Li ordered the double to go to bed and act according to the situation. The double obediently made the bed and lay down in it. He reported to the owner that he was already asleep. Li smiled and told Dowden that it was time for them to move out. The guy and his system assistant secretly hid on the roof of Kuan Yue's residence. Just at that time, the High Priestess came out into the courtyard and headed towards the bathhouse. In the courtyard of the priestess's residence, there was a hot spring where she bathed. The girl looked at her reflection in the water with disgust. She saw numerous scars on her body and whispered dirty. The priestess exclaimed why all this was not washed away even here. She had the feeling that all the places that fat pig had touched were still dirty. Tears started flowing from the girl's eyes. She stood in a font of hot water and quietly howled. Li sat quietly on the roof and watched the girl he had yet to conquer. Dudin recorded an increase in the level of obsession of the villainous Kuan Yue. It seems she remembered the past again. Fortunately, They didn't have time to desecrate her then, and she finished off that man herself. The high priestess pulled herself together and continued her ablutions. Having finished bathing, she came out of the spring, and one of the girls handed her a towel. Suddenly, there was a splash. Lee asked, doubting, who had fallen into the spring. He replied that it seemed to be Shi Tianrui. The guy was surprised. What? The main character is completely stupid. Tianrui emerged from the water and snorted loudly. The protagonist cursed. The jumping artifact worked too abruptly, and he was thrown straight into Kuan Yu's bathhouse. He decided that he needed to leave before he was noticed. But it was too late. The high priestess pulled him out of the water with her magic. Enraged, Kuan Yue directed a stream of her magical power at the intruder. She sternly asked the male if he understood where he had dared to climb. She exclaimed that he was just passing by. The priestess screamed. Did he decide to pass by on the roof of her house? The hero asked the high priestess to stop. Yes, he came here specifically to give her the ointment for the scars. She cursed and asked Shuaiden why he was teleported so close to the priestess. But Shuaiden didn't know. The function transfers to the target at a random point nearby, who knew that she was taking a bath. The high priestess looked at the gift held out to her. She exclaimed that the male had come with evil intentions and ordered the guards to seize him. Shi Tianrui ordered the system to urgently transfer him from here. The high priestess and her maids were surprised to see that the stranger had literally vanished into thin air. Yue ordered that security be strengthened, and that any man who entered the territory without permission would be immediately thrown into prison. All this time, Li sat on the neighboring roof and watched. He did not understand what just happened. He didn't understand the meaning of Shi Tianrui's actions at all. Dudine assumed that the protagonist had missed, but Li doubted it. He was the main character. The guy, of course, doesn't read much romance novels, but he saw a couple of videos. There, the heroine suddenly falls in front of the hero to seem special to him. Did she really want to do something like that? The guy cursed, and it was a bold move. But Dowden still thought it was an accident. The assistant asked the owner what to do now. They hadn't done anything yet, and Tianrui had already raised Kuan Yue's obsession. Li said that she was being very careful now. It was better to retreat so as not to be exposed. Today, she would hardly dare to act. Dude, on the orders of his master, teleported the boy back to the house. Back in his room, Li looked at his double lying in bed. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Chu Sui timidly asked if Yuan Yi was sleeping. The guy thought that he returned in time. He walked up to the door and calmly opened it. Sui was standing at the threshold. He told her that he was just lying there, unable to sleep. She asked permission to come in. Li invited the girl in with a smile. She quickly put her hand into her sleeve and pulled out a cake. On the way, she decided to buy some green bean cakes, but she doesn't know if he'll like them. The guy replied that he liked anything she gave him. The high priestess told her that removing the seal would be very painful, and Sui remained calm in front of her. But she was still scared. Li assured her that since she had decided to go this route herself, he would support her and be there for her, and she could count on him. The fox princess raised her large, slightly slanted eyes to him. She pressed herself even closer to Li Yuan Yi and quietly said that she only wanted one thing: for him not to become the same. The guy reassured her that he wouldn't, even if that Yuan Yi was no longer there. And while Li was here, he would treat her truly well. Duden informed the owner that Kuan Yue's obsession had decreased and his sympathy had increased, and he had received 50 points. Li smiled, which meant she had used the ointment after all, and if so, they might give her more points in the morning. The girl pulled him towards the bed and suggested that they go to sleep. An alluring aroma emanated from her body that was impossible to resist. She said that her birthday was coming soon. Li added that along with the mating season, when it begins, a strong pheromone will be released for 7 days straight. Ku Sui blushed and asked Yuan Yi if she could stay in his room for the time being, and he agreed. It's lucky that Ting Shuang is in hibernation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten to her these days. If the ointment worked, there's no need to worry about Kuan Yue. But the question remains whether Yuani's body can withstand such a load for 7 days straight. Li asked his assistant if this happened constantly or intermittently. Dudan explained that the attacks are irregular, lasting about 2 hours each, and it is better to buy a drink for physical endurance. Li grumbled, "Buy this, buy that, it sounds scary." The assistant said, "One serving is 10 points. No repeat purchase required. The stock is updated automatically, Lee agreed. At that very second, a can of a strengthening drink appeared in the guy's hand. He quickly drank the miraculous liquid because he felt that it would soon begin. If we're going to prepare for battle, then prepare in full. The system has reported that the effect has been activated. Suddenly, he heard the girl moan softly in her sleep. He asked her what happened. She opened her eyes, blushed deeply, and muttered that it was almost time. Lee sniffed the air and was taken aback by the wonderful aroma. The little fox sheepishly told her wolf that she was entirely his tonight. Ku Sui approached her chosen one. The lovers' faces were burning with frantic desire. Lee stood up and hugged the girl. He felt a fire burning inside him. He carefully pulled the sleeve of her house dress down from her elegant shoulder. The guy asked her if he was too harsh in the heat of passion. She wouldn't be offended. High Priestess Kuan Yue was getting ready for bed and suddenly remembered today's gift. She opened the jar and took some ointment. It gave off a subtle, pleasant aroma. Yu applied some ointment to one of the ugly scars covering her beautiful body. The priestess smiled and said that it didn't matter whether it would help or not. The main thing was that the gift was made from the heart. The girl applied some cream to her body and went to bed. The next day, Kuan Yue got up very early as usual. She walked over to her dressing table, on which stood a large mirror, and looked at herself. The high priestess was taken aback by what she saw. The ugly scars seemed to shrink. She couldn't believe it. She looked at her hands again and again. The scars had noticeably faded. The girl glanced sideways at the jar of scar ointment, wondering if it really had such a strong effect. Kuan Yue called out to her guards. After a tense night, Lee barely opened his eyes. Chu Sui was still sleeping. Duden informed the owner that Kuan Yue's sympathy had increased a little more, and he had been awarded more points. Lee replied in a whisper. It seemed like the scars were less noticeable now, judging by the increase in sympathy. Yue applied just a little bit of ointment, but a start has been made. The conversation will go easier from now on. It's possible that she has already sent people to look for Lee. It was indeed so. The priestess ordered to find yesterday's visitor. Her guards combed the entire city, but could not find the girl. They assumed that perhaps she had left Yangshan. Kuan Yue was surprised how she left the city. Wasn't she a local? Did she really run away with her cousin? The priestess smiled, and the girl, a good girl with character, ordered to continue the search for the girl. Suddenly, the high priestess stopped the guard. An idea came to her mind. She ordered to take a jar of ointment and find out at the market if anyone was selling a similar ointment. In the morning, Ku Sui and Aunt Chun discussed their affairs while Lee basked in the sun. Lee knew that there were already whispers on the streets that Kuan Yue was looking for that very girl. Dudin was asking when they would move on to the next step. The guy said that they would wait until she started looking for the ointment herself. Then they would show up. But Duden was afraid that she would stop searching. Lee objected. These scars are a mark of the past for her. Since the remedy worked, she will not back down. That's her character. After finishing her conversation with Chun, the fox princess headed towards her wolf cub. Sui told him that when the rut was over, she would go to the high priestess to remove the seal, and he would have to endure these days. The wolf's eyes sparkled. He replied that he would obey her and do as she wished. Ku Sui whispered to Li Yuan-yi not to say anything stupid. The guy exclaimed in admiration, "Sui is so beautiful." She blushed deeply. Li caught himself. Oh, he said it out loud, but it's true. His little fox is the most beautiful. The girl noticed that when her strength returned, she would no longer be able to be near him so often. In the novel, having gained power, Ku Sui gathered her parents' comrades, revived the Fox clan, and a year later led them on a campaign against the traitors. Li told the princess that he would be her support. But then he remembered why he blurted out such a pathetic remark. The girl asked if Yuan Yi seemed to have a hard time last night, but he replied that everything was fine. She gently took the guy's face in her hands and looked into his green eyes. The fox touched his fluffy hair. Now she was irresistibly drawn to him. Then she thanked her former master with a smile. There was still a thick layer of snow on the trees, and the city of Yangshan continued to live its life. In the evening, the high priestess's servants walked around the large market in Yangshan. They asked shopkeepers if they sold this ointment, or if they knew someone who did. The shopkeeper replied that he had never seen anything like this before, and that perhaps he should look among the traveling healers. There were plenty of them in Yangshan. The girl took the jar of ointment, deciding to ask more questions. They had already visited 7 or 8 shops without success. But for the high priestess, it was important. She needed to find it at any cost. Shi Tianrue watched from afar the servants of the high priestess Kuan Yue. He didn't understand anything. They were looking for some person and ointment. There was nothing like that in the book. Maybe someone was changing the course of the plot. The protagonist was near Kuan Yue's residence the whole time, but did not notice anything suspicious. 7 days passed. Li suggested that Sui take some ointment for the scars when he went to Kuan Yue. He bought it from a traveling doctor. The girl was surprised. 2 days ago, the priestess's guard came. They had a very similar bottle. The guards from the residence of the high priestess said that they had been looking for such an ointment for a long time, but to no avail. The girl took the jar, and Li said that when he and Sui were walking through the market, the high priestess passed by them. The guy noticed an old scar on her and thought that it could be useful to her, and he wanted Sui to make a good impression. After all, when you ask for help, you don't go empty-handed. He had already prepared everything, so Sui could take the ointment with him. She warned Yuan Yi that she would be gone for a few days, perhaps a week or 2. The guy took her thin hand and replied that no matter how long it took, he would wait for her. The princess and her faithful Aunt Chun went to the residence of the high priestess. Chun asked the lady priestess to accept expensive gifts, but Kuan Yue looked coldly at the chests filled with precious gifts. She told Chun that it was completely unnecessary. Ku Sui understood that it seemed the high priestess did not like such gifts. Yuan Yi's bottle really does look like the one the guard showed her. If the guy found what she was looking for, the princess told the priestess that she had one more small gift. Kuan Yu was stunned. This ointment? Where did Ku Sui get it from? The girl explained that her relatives bought this ointment from a traveling healer. The high priestess asked the fox princess if she was really ready to give her this ointment. The girl confirmed, saying that she had brought it especially for the priestess. Yue opened the lid. It really was the same ointment. Exactly the same. The priestess told the princess that the method of removing her seal needed to be thought through for a few more days. Perhaps it would be possible to ease her pain. Ku Sui was glad. That would be good. And the priestess also asked to find out in more detail from which particular healer her relatives bought this ointment. The girl replied in surprise that she understood everything and would do everything. After speaking with the princess of the Fox clan, the high priestess began the ritual. She said that this red bloodstone was imbued with her power and nourished with blood. Ku Sui should carry it with her. The stone will open the first layer of the seal. If Sui keeps it nearby every day, it will have a stronger effect. The princess bowed and thanked the high priestess. Left alone at home, Li explored the store. It was full of equipment, but everything cost from 100 points and up. He decided that he needed to quickly conquer the villain in order to farm skills for survival. Dudan reported to the owner that Kuan Yue's sympathy had sharply increased, and Li received 100 points as a reward. Li smiled. It seemed that even without showing himself in person, it was possible to raise sympathy. These scars were indeed her sore spot. The book said that scars are just one of the obstacles. The father left. The mother died. These wounds will have to be healed one by one. The guy looked at the report. He currently had 1,657 points, just a little short of reaching the 3rd level store. At the 3rd level, coupons for a 10% discount are unlocked. Up to 5 of them can be used at a time. One coupon is worth 10 points. Li admired this generous system. He already loves it. And then the guy noticed that the gate was opening. He was surprised that Ku Sui had really returned so quickly. Indeed, it was them with Aunt Chun. The girl joyfully exclaimed that Yuan Yi's ointment had helped a lot. This was exactly what the high priestess had been looking for. Once she was sure that it was the same ointment, her attitude towards Sui immediately changed, and she would find a gentler way to remove the seal. And Kuan Yue also gave the fox a bloodstone. With its help, she can open the first layer of the seal herself. Ku Sui froze, looking at her former master with admiration. Suddenly, she pulled him towards her and kissed him on the cheek. Li was a little taken aback by what was happening to her. Dudan exclaimed, "Wow!" The pink heart turned red. He saw this for the first time. The reward is 500 points. Li was puzzled as to what was going on. Could the already fixed villain also have an upgrade? The assistant congratulated the owner. In less than 5 minutes, he had managed to upgrade the store to level 3. The boy took the princess's tender face in his hands and told Kusui that she was his luck. And then he kissed the girl on the cheek, and the fox princess's cheeks flushed. The girl suddenly became angry with herself, wondering why she couldn't control herself at all in Li Yuanyi's presence. Kusui immediately began working with the High Priestess's bloodstone. The large crystal was blazing, spreading powerful bloody energy around itself. The fox princess felt power spreading through all her blood vessels. The magic stone hung in front of the girl, filling her body with the powerful magic of the priestess. Li asked the fox with concern if she felt anything. The princess's eyes sparkled, and she told the boy that the stone was working. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain squeeze her chest. The girl coughed, and Li Yuanyi asked her in fear what had happened to her. She replied that everything was fine. It seemed to be a side effect of removing the seal. Kusui's body hadn't used that kind of power for too long, so it couldn't withstand it right away. Li advised her to take a break and try the practice again, but the princess stubbornly objected. She wanted to break through at once and remove the first layer of the seal. She focused on the bloodstone again, filling it with her inner strength. Scarlet streams of Kuan Yu bloodstone magic flowed around the girl. She went inside herself, trying to maintain a connection with the stone. Suddenly, the princess opened her eyes and sighed. Li asked her if something was wrong. She looked at the stone in confusion and explained that for some reason, it had suddenly stopped working. The guy suggested that maybe they should go to the High Priestess, but the princess objected. The priestess is preparing a more reliable way to remove the seal. There is no need to distract her. It was Sui who rushed, did not follow the flow of power from the stone. She needs to go into seclusion for 3 days to even out the blood flow and strength, and then try again. She must not be disturbed during these days. Li reassured her that she shouldn't worry. He would look after the house. Sui was also afraid that the High Priestess might come for the ointment. If Li learned anything about the wandering doctor, she should tell her. The guy told her to leave it to him and to recover calmly, and he hugged the girl. He said that it was not difficult for him to help her. He wanted it himself. Chu Sui thanked him. In the evening, the High Priestess, as always, bathed in the hot spring in the courtyard of her residence. The maid carefully smeared the wide, ugly scars on her mistress's back with a miraculous ointment. Kuan Yue felt the scars on her body disappearing thanks to the ointment, and it was as if the past was slowly letting go of her as well. Having closed the lid, the girl informed the lady priestess that the ointment was already finished, but unfortunately, half of the scars still remained on Kuan Yue's body. The High Priestess said that she would personally go to Lady Kusui's house tomorrow and ordered that a gift be prepared for her. Yue was pleased. Those terrible scars were finally starting to fade little by little. By nightfall, Kusui prepared for solitude and locked herself in one of her chambers for 3 days. Li Yuanyi left her chambers and closed the doors tightly. Chun asked him how the princess was. He explained that difficulties arose when removing the seal, and Sui went into seclusion to balance her internal energy. The boy told Chun that there were only 3 jars of ointment left, and asked that if the High Priestess came, he give them to her. Li was sure that 3 jars would not be enough, and promised to try to find that traveling doctor. He asked to make sure that no one disturbed Kusui for 3 days. Aunt Chun promised to do everything. Li thanked her, and he himself was going to visit Tingshuang tomorrow to see how she was doing in hibernation. The guy understood that 3 jars would definitely not be enough, which meant that Kuan Yue would probably come again soon. So, we need to act according to plan, step by step taming the High Priestess Kuan Yue. Finding a convenient time, Li teleported to the entrance of Deng Tingshuang's cave in the Dark Tribe's forest. He bought a down blanket and a food set for the sleeping girl at the store. Li knew that Tingshuang would sleep for another 2 months, but if she woke up to have a snack, she would immediately see his gifts. Suddenly, Dudin exclaimed, "Things are bad." Li Yuanyi was puzzled by what had happened again. The assistant recorded a sharp increase in obsession. It seemed like she was having a nightmare. Li asked if he should wake her up. Dudin objected. It was impossible now. The guy was at a loss as to what to do. If he didn't come up with something, they would both be blown up. The assistant offered to buy the Dream Legend artifact for 100 points in order to enter her dream. Li cursed the system again, but ordered Dudin to buy and activate the artifact. The assistant obeyed. and Lee felt himself being transported into an unknown space. A moment later, the guy landed in the same dark race forest. Duden drew the owner's attention to little Tin Xuan, who was being chased by a whole crowd of people. A girl stole meat in the village, and one of the guys shouted, "Stop, you little scum," before they beat you up. The skinny girl ran away from her pursuers, meandering through the forest. But then she accidentally caught on a tree root and fell to the ground along with her prey. The man took the meat from her and said that if it weren't for her late father, she would have died long ago. He angrily warned her to get out of here, and if she ever set foot in the village again, he would strangle her. A dark energy, activated by her resentment and anger, began to flow around the hungry girl. Little Tin Xuan lay in the middle of the forest and became increasingly angry. Suddenly, unexpectedly for her, Lee extended his hand towards her and lightly touched her. He told the surprised girl that everything was fine and that he would protect her now. The boy asked the little girl with a smile if she seemed hungry, but she pushed Lee away and screamed at him to let her go. She didn't know who he was. Suddenly, her eyes widened, and she stuttered and asked the guy if he was really a messenger of the gods. Duden explained that in dreams, memory is distorted, but the craving for Lee does not go away. He answered the girl with a smile that he was not a god. He was the one who came to protect her. The boy extended his hand to the timid orphan and said that as long as he was nearby, no one would hurt her. The child's gaze became softer. Her cheeks became flushed. She believed this stranger. She timidly placed her small hand into Lee's outstretched one. He led her to the house, saying that it was a refuge and that she would be completely safe here. The girl saw the house and said in fear that this was a human dwelling and that she would not go there. Lee explained that he built this house especially for her. When she gets scared, she can hide inside and the house will protect her. Little Ting Xuang asked the messenger if he would abandon her. The guy replied, "Never. If she needs him, he will immediately appear." Duden exhaled. The obsession falls. Suddenly, the girl asked Lee if she would have children when she grew up. Lee replied yes, but only when she grows up, Duden said. The promises in dreams are etched into her memory. She will be obsessed with it. The guy was furious that the assistant hadn't said this before, but he calmly walked the girl into the house. Having calmed the child Ting Xuang in his sleep, Lee returned to the cave again. He looked at the girl. Anyone would become embittered if they had to relive their worst nightmares every day. Lee sighed heavily. Poor thing. She grew up all alone and suffered so much. Yuan Yi adjusted Ting Xuang's hair and said that this refuge in sleep would shield her from the shadows of the past. Duden screamed again that everything was bad. The level of obsession was growing again. Lee was stunned. They had all just decided that it was happening again. But Duden didn't know. It seemed that Tin Xuang had gotten stuck even deeper. The boy shouted for the assistant to write off the points and send him back to Ting Xuang's dream. Duden activated the one-time artifact, Dream Legend, and sent its owner into the girl's dream. Lee felt himself being transported into an unknown space again. He found himself again near the house where he had brought little Tin Xuan a few minutes ago. The guy knocked on the half-open door and said that he was there. Strong streams of the girl's dark energy immediately flew out of the doorway. Before Lee could gasp, Ting Xuang had grabbed his hands and feet and dragged him inside the house. The whole room was filled with her evil power. The girl was furious. She pinned him to the floor and screamed angrily that he had deceived her. He promised to come as soon as she called him. But 10 years have passed and he still hasn't returned. Li Yuan-yi lay inside the house and looked at the grown-up Ting Xuang in surprise. He suddenly felt her bitter tears dripping onto his face. The girl sobbed and growled that he had lied to her, that he was a liar. The guy extended his hand to her and said that he hadn't lied to her. It was just a dream. In reality, a moment had passed, but here centuries could have flown by. Lee explained to her that she was stuck in a nightmare, and if she didn't get out now, she might never wake up. He hugged the girl, trying to calm her down. She asked in surprise if this was a dream, since he wasn't deceiving her. Lee replied that if he were lying, he wouldn't have come back for her. Lee told Ting Xuang that if she really wanted to be with him, she had to destroy this nightmare. The girl looked in confusion at the one she considered to be the messenger of the gods. She clung to him and said she wouldn't believe a word he said until they had a baby. Her mother told her that if you truly love someone, You will want to have their children. Lee thought that intimacy in a dream would not lead to pregnancy, but refusal now would cause a sharp increase in obsession. He told Tin Xuan that he agreed to be with her for the rest of his life. And as for the rest, she could do whatever she wanted. The girl's eyes sparkled with happiness. She couldn't believe it was true. She pressed her lips to her chosen one, hurrying to feel the long-awaited closeness. Having received in a dream what she had passionately desired for 10 years, the girl finally calmed down. Dudan congratulated the owner. Tin Xuan escaped from the nightmare, and her sympathy literally flies into space. The reward is 500 points. The assistant expressed his respect to Li. He almost conquered the main villain of the novel, Deng Tingshuang. While Ku Sui was in seclusion, Li decided to visit Ruan Lingju. First, he needed to study her seal. The novel says that her seal is incredibly difficult to break. The details are described in passing. You need to find a way yourself. Li ordered the preparation of teleportation. Their target is the high priest of the forest tribe who sealed the girl. They found themselves in a snowy forest. Dudan reported good news. Kuan Yue's sympathy increased even more. He received 100 points. The guy thought that it seemed like the priestess had taken that scar cream from Aunt Chun after all. Li noticed that someone was coming. The forest people's hearing becomes twice as sharp in the thicket. The trees are like second ears for them. Ruan Lingju probably already knows that Li is here. But what if she misunderstands the guy? If the enemy does not fight, then Li decided not to fight either, but to first scout out the situation in their tribe. And then the guard shouted, "Stop hiding!" They had already spotted him, who he was and what he was sniffing around here for. Li replied with a smile that he was a traveling merchant from the wolf tribe. One of the elves asked if he was a merchant. Then where were his goods? The guy smiled. All the goods were hidden where he stopped for the night. The guards demanded that the wolf simply tell them where his goods were, and they would go and get them themselves. And if he lied, he would have only himself to blame. Li explained that his convoy was nearby in a mountain cave. The guy had hidden the goods in advance in a nearby grotto. The elves brought the captured wolf cub to the village elder and the high priestess of the forest tribe, Wang Xia. A tentacle of the thorny vine sent by Ruan Lingju was secretly watching them. But the girl's spy could not penetrate into the high priestess's room itself. The mighty forest maiden slept, sealed in a cocoon of thorny vines. She opened her eyes, receiving a signal that the same guy had reappeared in her forest domain. The forest guardians brought the captive to the assembly hall of the forest people. The village headman, Wang Xia, asked the guards what the young wolf had done wrong. The elf replied that this wolf called himself a merchant, but he was sniffing something at the gate. He was clearly up to something. The guy answered that he had heard that a powerful forest maiden was sealed in their tribe. He was passing by and became curious. The high priestess of the forest tribe exclaimed in surprise, asking how the wolf cub knew about this. Li played the simpleton and said, "Well, everyone's already talking about it." But Wang Xia couldn't believe that rumors had spread. Li objected. How else would he have found out? And asked if they would let him go now. The priestess decided that they would first check the guy's identity, and then decide if everything was clear, he would be able to trade in their village. For the night, the captured boy was placed in a separate room, and an armed guard was posted near the door. Li told Dudan to activate the double doll. The doll's expiration date was only 15 days left. Dudan asked what the owner had in mind, and he reminded him that during the day he had spread a rumor that everyone knew about the seal. Elder Wang will definitely go check on the prisoner, and they will keep an eye on her and see if they can find out anything about the spell itself. Leaving the double doll on the bed, Li ordered Dudan to move it closer to Wang Xia using teleportation. The system assistant was very pleased that the owner was showing such activity and happily teleported him. At that very moment, Li Yuanyi found himself in a snowy night forest outside the forest people's settlement. The guy realized that the high priestess of the forest people had left the village and was definitely heading towards Ruan Lingju. Soon, he saw her accompanied by guards. Li ordered Dudan to buy him an invisibility cloak. It turned out that this cloak cost as much as 500 points. Li was indignant. It was so expensive. Why didn't the assistant tell him about it right away? After grumbling, the guy agreed. Okay, a couple of uses would pay for its cost. and now he could follow Wang Xia. After some time, the high priestess stopped in a small forest clearing. Wang Xia, holding the magic staff in her hand, froze and listened carefully. Right in front of her stood a giant tree, its trunk glistening with the forest magic lurking within. All three elves bowed slightly to the forest giant, and the tree rustled its evergreen foliage in response. Li peered out from behind the shelter, trying to figure out where they were. Seeing the giant, he gasped, "What a tree!" The high priestess of the forest people turned to the tree and asked Lingju if she was sleeping. In response, powerful green vines began to crawl along the tree trunk, as if forming a living ladder for the forest maiden. Li wondered if Ruan Lingju's body was actually sealed inside this forest giant. The boy watched the actions of the elven high priestess closely and did not immediately notice that a thorny vine was reaching towards him. He only came to his senses when he discovered that the sleeping forest maiden's spy had gotten under his trousers. Li was surprised. He was wearing an invisibility cloak. How could Lingju sense him? The guy cursed. Now he can't make a sound. Dudin guessed that the villain Ruan Lingju had been watching them in the forest, so the cloak couldn't fool her. Feeling a liana rising under his clothes, Li cursed. It looks like she wants to set him up. And then everyone saw Ruan Lingju descending from a huge tree along a ladder of green vines. The girl approached the high priestess of the forest people and boldly asked Wang Xia why she called her. The village elder began to check the safety of the magical seal placed on the forest maiden. Lingju chuckled. Xia shouldn't worry. Her seal is unbreakable. But the priestess was worried about how the wolf cub could know their secret. These are forbidden lands. Only a select few know about them. The secret should not have come to light. Wang was perplexed. Could there really be a traitor among them? The girl told Wang Xia that if she ever got out, the priestess would be the first one she would kill. The woman replied that Lingju needed to be sealed. Dudin noticed that the girl was almost completely blackened. She was very angry. After listening to the elven high priestess, Ruan Lingju said with a smile, "That's why Wang Xia's death is her priority." Having checked the integrity of the seal, the high priestess, accompanied by guards, left, heading back to the village. The girl turned and looked straight at the tree behind which Li Yuanyi and his system assistant Dao Ding were hiding. The boy realized that the forest maiden did know where he was hiding. The girl loudly told the secret guest to come out already. The elves had gone far enough away and would not be able to notice him here. Li took off his hood and greeted Ruan Lingju, saying, "Hello again. Long time no see." She asked why the guy was following Wang Xia. Li was confused. If she didn't believe him and got angry, the obsession would take off and there would be problems. But if he lies to her now, and then the truth comes out, then goodbye to his trust. And then he will also give Shi Tianrui a head start. Li explained to the girl that he was simply curious about how exactly her own relatives had sealed her. The forest villain silently looked at the unusual night guest. Ruan Lingju smiled broadly and noticed that the guy was surprisingly honest. She asked the second question. He had clearly left her surveillance zone. While he had appeared here so suddenly, the guy explained that he had many artifacts, including those that allowed him to move freely in space. He felt her vine on his body, which was monitoring the beating of his heart, Li thought. They are just saying what these actions are for. The forest elf asked with a smile if he was really that interested in her, and Li mumbled something unintelligible in confusion. Ruan Lingju asked if his little fox knew about his forest adventures. Li Yuanyi admitted that Ku Sui didn't know anything about it, and there was no need for her to know about it. The girl snapped her fingers, and a real green chair for the little forest princess appeared from the liana. She narrowed her green eyes and asked if he had decided to have a snack on the side behind his woman's back. The guy was a little confused. Lingju was too persistent. Well, he couldn't tell her that she was his target. Li calmly replied, "Why bother snacking? If he liked Lingju, he would say so openly." The forest elf laughed. What amazing sincerity. But the one she likes must belong to her alone. If there is someone else in his heart, she will have to kill that woman. Li objected. Ku Sui was the first. If he fell in love with Ruan Lingju, he would do everything to protect his little fox. She smiled and reminded him that she hadn't said yet that she liked the wolf cub. So, why the rush? Besides his face, he's not her type, let's say. He looks rather mediocre, unfortunately. Li was taken aback. and Dudin reminded the owner that Lingzhu adores handsome men. Every heroine has her own standards, and this one is hard to please. The guy mumbled, he knows he's not as handsome as the main character Shi Tianrui, but he's still a good-looking guy. Li exclaimed that he would definitely prove what ordinary guys are capable of. Or did she think that without a pretty face you can't win a woman over? He chuckled. Did she really think that he cared about her beauty? She shouldn't be so self-confident. She wasn't the limit of her dreams either. The guy calmly took her liana, which was wrapped around his body, and calmly tore it away from himself. Li promised Lingzhu that he would correct her stupid tastes and prove how superficial she was. The forest beauty was silent in surprise. Dudin couldn't believe it. She didn't even become obsessed. No emotions. It was even strange. He advised her to wait until he released her. And then she would beg him on her knees for forgiveness. She was taken aback. The wolf cub grinned and assured her that he would teach her everything she needed to know, so she shouldn't worry. One of the forest guards yawned tiredly. It was already deep night and he wanted to sleep. The second one grumbled, "How boring! It's almost shift change. I need to go and see how their prisoner is doing." Looking inside, the elf saw a sleeping double. The elf was surprised. The guy was really nervous. They locked him up and he was sleeping. He was probably just a merchant. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so relaxed. The forest maiden glared at Li. How could he free her? There was no need to talk such nonsense in vain. She rose from her chair and snorted in displeasure. What a boring night it had been tonight. Having said this, the dissatisfied girl rushed away, leaving Li Yuanyi standing near the tree. Li sighed with relief and asked Dudin to return him to the hut. He replied that he had escaped. At least she had not become angrier. The cheerful system assistant warned the owner that he was initiating teleportation according to the coordinates. At that very moment, the guy found himself on the bed instead of the double doll. He stretched and thought. There were 2 days left. He needed to get some sleep, and tomorrow he would start establishing connections with the forest people. Li slept well for the rest of the night, and the next day, fluffy snow continued to fall in the forest. She brought him back to the elder, and she apologized to the wolf for locking him up and allowed him to sell his goods in the village. Li replied that it was nothing. It was also his fault. If Wang Xia had no more questions, then he would probably go. The high priestess of the forest people stopped the wolf cub, who kindly asked whether the elder apparently needed something from him. The elderly elf asked the guy warily if those rumors were really already being spread around. Li suggested that she send people to Yangshan herself and check. Although he exaggerated a little yesterday, only a few people know about it. So there is no need to worry too much. People know the story itself, but no one knows the details. Wang Xia sighed with relief. That's great, that's very good. But then Li said that he remembered something else. The high priestess of the wood elves asked in fear what exactly. Li said that someone mentioned some kind of giant tree, but the guy heard it out of the corner of his ear. Didn't really understand what was going on, or maybe these were two completely different stories, and he lumped them together. Wang Xia was dumbfounded. How could it be that the strangers had somehow even learned the secret of the sacred tree? Things were taking a very bad turn. The worried high priestess of the wood elves quickly left the assembly hall of their tribe. She ordered 2 of her most trusted guards to follow her. There was something she urgently needed to check before it was too late. Li realized that his words had made Wang Xia uneasy. She was fidgeting and would soon take action. Dudin asked the owner if they would follow her. The guy smiled, naturally. It was not for nothing that he scared her. The priestess and the guards entered the secret room. Li remembered that this hiding place was mentioned in the novel. A very important artifact was located here. Dudin clarified that 5 relics were needed to remove the seal. Only after collecting them all could one move on. Xia knocked on the door. Obeying the high priestess of the elves, the wall parted and a secret staircase leading downwards appeared in the passage. Li, covered by an invisibility cloak, carefully watched the actions of the priestess and her trusted guards. He quickly jumped down from his observation post and rushed towards the closing secret passage. The guy quickly squeezed through the gap so that he could follow the worried high priestess and see everything. Wang Xia, accompanied by the battle elves, walked confidently through the long dungeon. and Li Yuanyi followed behind them. Finally, they came to something glowing, like a tree, and Li realized that it was the tree root of that very giant. The high priestess took out the talisman and approached the very root of the sacred tree that held Ruan Lingju. Having uttered a secret spell, the woman threw the talisman at the root of the sacred tree of the wood elves. At that very moment, the roots parted and a magical glowing well opened before the priestess. She lowered her hand into the glowing well. Li did not take his eyes off her, wondering what Wang Xia was hiding there. She pulled out a large green stone and sighed with relief. It was in place, and the priestess felt a sense of relief. Having calmed down, the village elder, accompanied by guards, set off on her return journey, and Li headed towards the well while it was still open. He thought in surprise that they had to hide it so securely. Dudan suggested that the talisman on Wang Xia's belt was the key that opened the passage to the barrier. Li sighed. He would have to steal it. The guy justified himself. He was stealing for a good cause, so that the villain wouldn't become embittered and destroy the whole world. Wang Xia would understand him. Dudin sounded the alarm. Things were bad. The level of Ruan Lingju's obsession was sharply climbing. Li was surprised at why this had happened and ordered Dudin to quickly teleport him to the forest maiden. The system assistant obeyed, and the guy literally dissolved into thin air, instantly disappearing from the dungeon. At that very moment, Li Yuanyi appeared next to the sacred tree, in the depths of which the villain Ruan Lingju was imprisoned. The guy loudly asked Lingju what was wrong with her, why her mood had suddenly gotten so bad. Li covered his eyes with his hand. He couldn't understand what was happening here, where such a powerful glow was coming from. Suddenly, the maiden sealed there appeared from the trunk and shouted at Li to let her out. Dudan did not understand why she was so furious. Li guessed that Wang Xia had taken out that green stone. The seal's power had fallen, and Lingju's shackles had weakened, which was why she had gone berserk. Dudan screamed, "Disaster!" Another black heart appeared on the scale. What to do? She's about to completely go crazy. The guy clenched his fist. He really needed to do something urgently before it was too late. Li threw off the hood of his invisibility cloak and walked up to the tree from which the forest villain was trying to escape. He took her face in his hands and promised that he would remove this damn seal and pull her out, and asked her to trust him. But the girl's eyes were burning with anger. She demanded that he let her go immediately. The enraged villainess launched a thorny vine at her savior. Li Yuanyi didn't expect an attack, but he suddenly felt the girl's thick, barbed spear pierce through him. The boy fell silent. Thin streams of blood flowed from his mouth. He was seriously injured by Ruan Lingju's vine. A frightened Dudan shouted to his owner, "No, he can't die now." The evil forest elf's Liana threw the wounded Li Yuanyi into the snow. The system assistant shouted at the guy to be careful. The guy fell into the snow. He couldn't understand why this girl suddenly attacked him, begging him to let her go. He touched the wound. His clothes were soaked with blood. Li asked Dudan if he was going to die now. The assistant objected. Li muttered, "Since Dudan doesn't want him to die, then he should quickly drag the first aid kit here." The assistant said that the store sells a revival pill for 1,000 points. It will get you back on your feet instantly. All you need is Li's consent. The guy grumbled, "He's dying here," and Dudan decided to rob him blind. The assistant objected. "That's the price tag of the main system." He agreed, "Okay, let him give it here. Otherwise, he's really done for. The wound is very serious." The system reported that the boy received a revival pill worth 1,000 points. Li shed tears and mentally said goodbye to his hard-earned points. A green, iridescent bottle containing a life-giving pill of rebirth appeared in Li Yuanyi's bloodied hand. He quickly swallowed the magical remedy and green healing magic immediately began to flow around him. Soon, the blood on his clothes disappeared. The wound began to heal, just like the clothes torn by the vine. Li noticed that the elf was currently in berserker mode. It was better not to approach her at all. Dudan asked what to do. According to the sensors, Ruan Lingju's obsession is growing. They have at most an hour before she completely goes dark. The guy thought about it. She was crazy about handsome men, but Dudan didn't understand what her weakness for handsome men had to do with it. Li asked the assistant if he remembered her first meeting with Tianrui in the novel. He confirmed that she fell in love, and the obsession immediately fell. Yuanyi exclaimed, That's right. This weakness of hers is their main trump card. Lee remembered that there was an appearance-changing effect in the store. This thing cost 300 points to use, and the preset was saved for the entire period, Duden confirmed. He'll set it up now. The appearance editor appeared on the screen. Lee asked his assistant if he had Takeshi Kanashiro's appearance. Duden confirmed that it does exist, but you'll have to pay an extra 50 points for it. The guy decided that points could be earned. He would earn more later. His assistant reported that he had 307 points left. Lee shed tears. But he had earned these points with sweat and blood for Deng Ting Shuang and Ku Sui. Duden reassured the owner that points were a temporary thing, and you couldn't take them with you to the next world. The guy grumbled that the day would come when he would personally wipe out this main system. But for now, he launched his face editor. The process of changing the face began, and Duden, who was watching this, was delighted. It was simply amazing how cool it turned out. Once the appearance was edited, Lee turned to Lingju again and promised that he would definitely get her out. But she angrily screamed that she would destroy them all, wipe them off the face of the earth, and leave no one alive. But when her gaze fell on the guy's renewed face, she suddenly fell silent and instantly changed. The girl blinked her big green eyes in admiration. She suddenly asked to forgive her. She got a little carried away. Lee thought, sweat is an infection. She talks to stunning guys in a completely different way. She noted with embarrassment that the guy had become more handsome. Lee sighed with relief. She finally calmed down. Lingju smiled. Well, of course. He is such a handsome man, it is simply impossible to take your eyes off him. And he is also in love with her. Lee asked the girl if she was now ready to listen to him. The beauty immediately flew up to her handsome hero. The guy remembered when he read the novel. Everything seemed cool to him. A bunch of beauties in a harem, and a main character who can do everything. Lingju touched the guy's face, whispering enthusiastically, "You are my handsome man." Lee sighed. She did not calm down. This is Kanashiro's power. Lee pushed the beauty away, telling her to stop. But the girl screamed that she couldn't wait. She wanted to kiss him. He ordered Duden to quickly give him back his face. He didn't want to kiss a villainess with someone else's appearance. The impatient girl pressed her lips to the lips of the young wolf cub, her obsession beginning to diminish. The guy was amazed. So this is what they are like, forest elves. Even their saliva smells like freshly mown grass. The young wolf almost lost his mind completely because of this capricious villainous Ruan Lingju. They felt dizzy from kissing too long under the sacred elven tree. Lee cursed mentally. He had already returned his face, but what if this provoked a surge of obsession? Lingju remained silent. Finally, she asked the guy why he removed that extremely handsome face. Duden was relieved to tell his owner that the level of obsession was not increasing, and she had finally calmed down. The guy realized that it turned out that she wasn't so annoyed by his appearance. She was just being mean in words. The girl gasped in embarrassment. It was her very first kiss. She wondered if this young wolf was really her chosen one and savior. How strange it all was. Li Yuanyi looked questioningly at the thoughtful forest elf, one of the villains of this fictional world. Suddenly, the girl's eyes closed, and she began to disappear into the greenery of the sacred tree of the forest elves. Lee and his system assistant heard her words from afar that she would wait for the handsome man to save her. The guy was very surprised. Was it really true that Lingju wasn't angry? This was so unusual with her quarrelsome and spiteful nature. Okay, there was no point in lingering near this tree for too long, and Lee ordered Duden to return back to the elven village. The system assistant obeyed, and Li Yuanyi was transported from the forbidden place to the forest people's settlement. Li lay in the forest hotel and thought, they had the first key artifact to remove the seal. There were still 3 left. Wang Xian knows exactly where they are, but collecting them all is quite a quest. As soon as the 4 artifacts are pulled out, the barrier will immediately weaken. If the barrier weakens, Lingju will break loose again. With her fierce anger towards the tribe, freedom will not calm her, but will only finish off the remnants of her sanity. Removing the seal and pacifying the elf with a snap of the fingers would not work. Duden reminded them that they needed to return to Yanshan tomorrow. Li grabbed his head. There were too many villains for him alone. His head was spinning. This Wei Xiaobo was really a genius in harem affairs. The guy decided to return to Yangshan. They wouldn't be able to do anything else here in a day anyway. He needed to read up on these forest people. Dude happily agreed with the owner and quickly sent him back to the big city of Yangshan. Li found himself near the gate in the outer courtyard of a large house that once belonged to the rulers of a large fox clan. He carefully opened the inner gate and looked into the courtyard of a large, luxurious estate. Seeing Aunt Chun training, Li waved his hand to her in a friendly manner. The warrior kept herself in excellent shape. Chun said that the high priestess came yesterday and took the scar cream. She wants to personally thank Li when he returns. The guy feigned genuine surprise. Did she really want to meet him? But he was a man. Chun assumed that the scars had healed, so she had become kinder. If Li kept his distance, everything would probably work out. Li said that he found a doctor, but the cream ran out. The old man shared the recipe with the guy and taught him how to prepare this remedy. Auntie took several jars of cream and was surprised. Wow! What a kind person this wandering doctor was. Li asked how Ku Sui was doing. Chun shrugged her shoulders. Everything was quiet. It seemed like there were no problems. Yuan Yi was delighted. That was great. And later, he would have to go to the herb shop and make another batch of cream. The guy decided to immediately visit the priestess. But near her residence, he was stopped by guards who asked who he was and whether he had an invitation. Li replied that the priestess had visited them a couple of days ago, and he had brought her a new batch of cream for severe scars. The girls asked him what his name was, and he bowed and introduced himself as Li Yuan Yi. The guards invited Mr. Li to come inside. The high priestess had warned them about him. Shi Tianrui had been on duty outside Kuan Yue's residence all this time, and saw his rival calmly enter the premises. The official protagonist growled, "Why the hell did they let him in? What a nasty thing." This time traveler occupied the body of the extra Li Yuan Yi. Shuaiden asked the owner what to do if this continues. He will take all the villains into his hands. Their risk of being blown up is growing. Shi clenched his fist angrily. Yes, he had been foolish and had relied too much on his status as the main character of this novel. He punched the wall and exclaimed that Yuan Yi's luck was over, and that Shi, the real protagonist, had to save this world. Shuaiden carefully asked the owner what the plan was, how he was going to do it. Tianrui laughed. The girls had at least warmed up to Yuan Yi already. If he tried to force his way in now, he might cause disgust. Therefore, their goal with Shuaiden is to set the villains against this upstart Li Yuan Yi. As soon as the girls start to hate him, Shi Tianrui will appear and take the entire harem of beauties for himself. The security girl took Li into Kuan Yue's office and asked him to wait there. The guy agreed. He assumed that with her attitude towards men, she probably wouldn't let him in, and that wasn't surprising. The girl came out and apologized. The high priestess was busy now. Mr. Li would have to sit here and wait. Li responded in a friendly manner. No problem. Everything was fine. He would be happy to wait for the priestess here. The guy settled down on the pillow, and soon Kuan Yue thanked Mr. Li for the scar cream from behind the curtain. He informed the priestess that he had brought her a new portion. And by the way, now he himself knew how to prepare this wonderful remedy. Yue was surprised. Could it really be that way? Li confirmed that it was so. He specifically found that doctor, but he decided to leave for other lands. An unusually kind person, he sold medicines almost at cost, he taught Li, so the first batch is already ready. He explained that the blue bottle contained his personal composition, and the other two contained the remains of the healer, so the priestess could compare which cream was better. Li handed the jars to the girl and asked, if it wasn't too much trouble, to tell her later if there was a difference so that the cream could be improved. Kuan Yu noticed that Li Yuanyi was a very caring guy and not at all arrogant, which was surprising. She asked Mr. Li why he was even bringing her this cream, since it was probably a very valuable and expensive product. Li explained that the priestess had agreed to help his Kusui remove the seal, so they owed Kuan Yue a huge debt. The high priestess opened the blue jar, curious to check the cream that Li Yuanyi had made himself. She carefully sniffed the scar remedy. The smell was identical. Now she needed to test its effect. The girl put the cream on the table and decided to come out to the visitor from behind the curtain that was hiding her. She thanked Li. The priestess said that if she continued to hide behind the curtains, it would be completely indecent on her part. The guy bowed and replied that he knew she didn't like men, so there was nothing wrong with her refusing to see him. She noticed that her visitor was noticeably different from other men, and Duden noted an increase in sympathy. Yu thanked Lee again and assured him that she would take on Chusui's case first, so he shouldn't worry. The guy's system assistant was jubilant. He was awarded another 100 points for his increased sympathy. One sympathy heart turned pink, and the conquest of the complex villain was finally underway. Lee was overjoyed. Great. The visit to the High Priestess Kuan Yue could not have gone better. It was the evening of Kusui's third day of seclusion, and the boy was eagerly waiting for his little fox to finally come out. Li Yuanyi and Aunt Chun stood guard at the door to the princess's chambers, worried about how she was feeling. And finally, the doors of the chambers swung open, and a stream of powerful energy flew out from there. At that very moment, Kusui appeared on the threshold of the room. The fox princess had changed almost beyond recognition over the past 3 days. Chun and Li Yuanyi's faces stretched and their mouths dropped open in surprise. And the boy muttered, "Chusui." Wow. The girl said with a smile that she was terribly hungry. After all, 3 days without food is quite difficult to endure. Chun burst into tears. The princess succeeded. She was so transformed. She became the spitting image of the Fox Queen in her best years. Sui replied that she was still far from complete success. The Bloodstone helped remove 2 levels of the seal at once. She didn't even expect that. Chun was happy. This was simply wonderful. She ran to set the table, because the princess was very hungry. Li noticed that they had only removed 2 levels, but there were already such changes. How beautiful it would be when the seal finally collapsed. He was already looking forward to the day when his little fox would be completely free. She looked at him with loving, shining eyes. The guy hugged his fragile beauty and tenderly told her that he was incredibly happy for her, that she was finally becoming herself. Sui pressed herself against Li and thanked him. If it weren't for his help, she would have waited an unknown amount of time for this chance. The fox called the guy Li for the first time. He was stunned. She called him so affectionately. He really liked the way it sounded. He said that he went to see Kuan Yue. She promised that she would take care of Sui's issue first. She was surprised that the priestess accepted him. Li explained that he had learned how to make a cream for scars, so she changed her anger to mercy. The girl understood. So that's what it was. The fox princess looked at her wolf cub in confusion. Her cheeks suddenly flushed. Li did not understand what was happening to her. Finally, he asked the girl what was wrong, whether he had somehow offended his beautiful young fox. She answered her beloved that her body had changed, and if he wanted to taste her, she was already missing him. The girl smiled slyly and whispered that at the same time the wolf would check whether her body was better then or now. Li Yuanyi couldn't resist such a proposal. He hugged his cunning little fox tighter. Picking up the beauty in his arms, he said tenderly, "Oh, you're such a naughty girl. You've already learned to flirt." The fox princess urged her male to hurry. Otherwise, Aunt Chun was cooking too quickly. The next day, Li Yuanyi went to the residence of the High Priestess Chuan Yue again. The girl invited Mr. Li into her office, passing behind the curtain where he had never been invited before. Li bowed to the priestess and said that she had never liked men, and he didn't want to be an eyesore to her with his presence. She replied, "It's nothing. She doesn't feel any hostility towards him, so he can come in." Duden again noted an increase in sympathy. The guy knew that at such a moment he shouldn't show off too much. Otherwise, he would look like a hardened trickster, but a drop of timid simplicity would be just right. Thinking about this, Li Yuanyi stepped behind the translucent curtain. The priestess invited the guy to sit down with a smile. On the table next to her lay all 3 jars that Li had brought her earlier. She said that the cream that he had made himself was also quite good, although the effect was a little weaker than that of the traveling doctor. Li replied sheepishly that he was in a hurry and might have gotten the proportions of the herbs a little mixed up. If the priestess trusted him, then let him give him a couple of days. Kuan Yu asked if she needed any help, and Li suggested that he bring her a new sample every day. Yu thought that Li was already doing her a favor. Why bother him like that? They could agree on days and she would drop by herself. Li thought about it. It wasn't quite what he needed, but it was still better than nothing. He could start with this and then build on the success. He replied with a smile that if it was convenient for the priestess, he was all for it. and asked how about the first test in 3 days. The priestess agreed and went. At the same time, she would help Lady Kusui remove another layer of sadness from her body. Li Yuanyi bowed to the Lady High Priestess and thanked her heartily for taking care of his little fox and him. The guy understood that only by reducing the strength of the cream and offering new tests could he so gracefully increase the frequency of his meetings with Kuan Yue. Dudin noticed that at this rate, the owner would get a couple more pink hearts on Kuan Yu's scale in half a month. Li hoped to use this time to find her main weaknesses for a complete trap. But he needed to buy herbs and something else for appearance's sake. Shi Tianrui muttered, "This guy is no slouch. He's already wandering around the High Priestess's place like it's his own home." The protagonist realized that he had acted too brazenly and overestimated his strength before, and now he needed to keep an eye on Li Yuanyi. Now the target is Yuanyi Kuan Yue, and she is madly worried about the scars. In order to quarrel between them, it is necessary to hit precisely on this sore point. Li Yuanyi has a system, so it's dangerous to dig under him directly. You have to wait for his actions and play a dirty trick on Kuan Yue. Shuaiden told the owner that the situation was such that their points balance was almost 0, and the store was only level 1. She demanded that his assistant explain to him how to earn these damn points, and he replied that only by taming the villains. Shuaiden muttered guiltily. He was very ashamed that he could not help the master in any way. Tianrui snorted angrily at the assistant. He growled at this useless piece of code to display everything he could afford and had available at the moment. He would figure it out. Meanwhile, Li went into the shop and made some small purchases to avoid being seen, while Shi Tianrui followed him and watched. The angry protagonist commanded that they would follow Li Yuanyi, stay near his house, and wait for the right moment. 3 days later, the High Priestess, as promised, went to the house of the Fox Princess Kusui. Aunt Chun greeted the dear guest who had honored their home with her visit with a smile. The High Priestess apologized for disturbing her, but Chun responded by inviting the lady to quickly enter the house. They were waiting for her. Chun brewed the best tea for Kuan Yue, trying to please this amazing girl, whom everyone respected and feared. Auntie said that the young master would be coming soon, and in the meantime, they could drink tea in peace. Yue thanked him with a smile. Then Li Yuanyi appeared and asked the priestess to forgive him for keeping her waiting. The guy was bringing her 3 different cream samples. Kusui was walking next to Li, and the priestess was stunned when she saw her. The girl had changed so much that it was difficult to even recognize her at first. Kuan Yue asked the girl if she was really Mrs. Kusui, and the princess confirmed with a smile that she was. Yu said the changes were amazing. When the seal fell, she would be lucky enough to see the true greatness of the royal fox family. Li Yuanyi suggested that the guest first test the medicine he had prepared. He tried very hard and made 3 different versions. He explained to the High Priestess that these jars contained different proportions of herbs, and she could try each one and choose the best one. Here's the main secret to satisfying a picky customer. Giving them a choice of several options will immediately increase their loyalty. Kuan Yue opened the jars one by one and smelled them carefully. She told Mr. Li that she would take all 3 portions. She promised to come and discuss the results with him after testing. Li asked, "What about Kusui's case?" Yu smiled. Mr. Li need not worry. The second reason for her visit was precisely to remove the next layer of the seal. Kusui thought, "He always thinks about her," doubting exclaimed. Another red heart. 500 points awarded. The High Priestess took the Fox Princess by the hand and led her to separate chambers, where everything was prepared for the ceremony. Li watched them go. It was a little strange. His 2 villains walking together, holding hands and smiling at each other. The guy laughed to himself. Today's tasks were completed just perfectly. Now he could rest a little. Li summed it up. He had already crossed paths with 4 villains, and with Kusui everything was perfect. He had practically conquered her completely. In second place in terms of progress is Deng Ting Shuang, but she is sleeping. Now all efforts need to be thrown at Chuan Yue. This is where the breakthrough is closest. But with Ruan Lingzhu, everything is complicated. Removing her seal is quite a task. While Ting Shuang is in hibernation, we need to raise Kuan Yue's sympathy. He ordered Dudan to open his character card. The system assistant obeyed his successful master. The guy stretched sweetly and said that the finish line was still far away. He needed to push himself, to see how much longer he could stand in one place. At this moment, the head of the real protagonist appeared on the roof of the house. Shi Tianrui climbed to his observation post. The protagonist was shaking with anger. This Kuan Yue herself came to Li Yuanyi. To what level had he already pumped up her sympathy? Shuai Din reassured the owner. He needed to watch, and the chance would definitely appear. She agreed. Okay, he couldn't give in to emotions. But the main character was overcome with anger. He was literally blazing with rage, exclaiming, "How can one be calm here?" Li immediately noticed the surveillance and chuckled to himself. It seemed like the invincible protagonist had completely lost his composure. Most heroes in books have the aura of being the chosen one. But if you encounter a similar time traveler, all the fun is ruined. One can only hope that the novella authors never throw such a sneaky extra as Li as a rival to the main character. Chu Sui closed the door to her chambers and politely thanked the high priestess for coming into their home. Kuan Yu replied that they had also helped her a lot, so she thanked them. But time was of the essence, and she suggested that Ku Sui begin. To begin, the fox princess must remove all outer clothing so that her body can breathe easier during this complex ritual. The high priestess filled herself with energy and placed the necessary magical herbs and her talismans into the prepared bath. Kuan Yue herself also quickly took off her outer clothing to help the princesses through this painful procedure. She told the girl to lie down in a bath with herbs and talismans. The water would help her more easily endure the removal of the shackles. Ku Sui obediently lay down in the bath. She wanted to get her power back, and then her clan, so much that she was ready to do anything. The high priestess concentrated and began the ritual of removing the shackles from the princess's core in order to release the powers hidden within her body. The room filled with magical currents of the high priestess's power. A clot of golden magic swirling in her slender hand. She warned Sui that as soon as she felt a hot whirlwind in her lower abdomen, she should immediately dive headfirst into the water. Soon, the fox princess felt a burning sensation in her lower abdomen. She realized that it was time to dive into the water, but she was a little scared. Kuan Yue also entered the bath and sat opposite the girl. She was supposed to ease the pain of her body when the shackles were broken. The priestess noticed that the water was beginning to heat up greatly, but the princess would have to endure it. This was the result of magical influence. Kuan Yu grabbed the girl by the knees and directed her golden magic straight into her body, directing it to the very core. Ku Sui screamed in pain, as if hundreds of hot needles were simultaneously piercing her tender body and passing right through her. The priestess took the girl by the hands, transferring her power to her, and at the same time, read a spell that freed her from the heavy shackles. And so, the clot of golden magic of the high priestess reached the chains that bound the power of the young princess of the Fox clan. These shackles held the true power of the clan's heiress, the one who was so strong that she could destroy this entire world. But the young princess also had the power of creation, a great love that could make this world beautiful. Finally, a stream of golden magic destroyed the shackles. The magic chain cracked and began to disintegrate, releasing the power of the fox cub. An exhausted Ku Sui hugged the high priestess, her entire body burning from the painful ritual. The princess suddenly felt a magical flow pass through her entire body again, and she screamed in unbearable pain. The ritual was completed. Kuan Yue congratulated Lady Chu Sui. Another level of seal was successfully removed. She became even stronger. The smiling princess emerged from the bath and called the now fully dressed high priestess. Surprised, Kuan Yue looked at the girl. Maybe she wanted to ask something else. But why wasn't she getting dressed? The flushed princess beckoned the guest with a graceful finger and asked her to come closer to her. The high priestess approached the bath in which she had just performed the ritual of removing the seal from the young princess. Suddenly, Ku Sui wrapped her graceful arm around the high priestess's waist and pulled the stunned girl towards her. The princess inhaled the scent of the priestess's body with pleasure. She wanted to cuddle up to her and kiss that beautiful face. Ku Sui's hands slid over the priestess's elastic body, and she froze in surprise, not understanding what the princess was doing. Kuan Yue's eyes flashed with terror, and her cheeks flushed with embarrassment and shame, and she asked Sui in surprise what she was doing. But the princess was smiling. She was clearly enjoying everything that was happening between them. Yu muttered that they were both women, and the princess asked if the priestess only had an aversion to men. Sui took the girl by the chin and said that Yue had taken on too much and was living in constant oppression. If you always hold on to the past, how can you become happy? Yue asked Lady Chu Sui in confusion to remove her hand from her body. But the princess's hand passed over Yue's chest, Sui said. When resentment accumulates in the heart, the character becomes obsessive. Ku Sui gently advised the high priestess to let go of her past, let go of herself, and finally, be happy. The high priestess flew out of the princess's room and, without saying anything to anyone, very quickly headed towards the exit of the house. Li Yuan-yi tried to stop the priestess and ask how everything went, but she just slammed the door and instantly disappeared. The guy didn't understand what was going on at all. Dudin recorded an increase in Kuan Yue's sympathy, for which Li received another 100 points. Li was puzzled by why her sympathy had suddenly grown, since he hadn't done anything at all, and she looked rather strange. At this time, Ku Sui came out of the room and said with a smile that Kuan Yue turned out to be very nice. The girl beckoned her beloved wolf cub to her with a smile, her cheeks burning with unsatisfied love passion. Li asked her if she had removed another layer of the seal. She confirmed, and asked if he liked the way she looked now. The guy picked her up in his arms and replied that of course he liked her and he still wanted to taste her. She laughed and called him a rascal, but her eyes sparkled with happiness. And now it was hard to imagine that she hated him. Li Yuanyi easily carried his beautiful fox into his bedroom and laid her on the large, soft canopy bed. The girl persistently beckoned him to her, demanding that he come closer to her. She did not want to be without him for even a minute. The guy teased her by kissing her foot. Sui trembled with excitement and called Yuan Yi even more insistently. Li smiled. The little fox is becoming more and more skilled in seduction. What a naughty girl. The fox princess told her dear wolf that no matter what she became, she would always be very obedient and grateful to him. The guy pulled the noticeably older and even more beautiful Ku Sui towards him. It was impossible to resist her. In the evening, Kuan Yue went to her bathhouse again. She was going to try out the new creams made by Li Yuanyi. The maids removed the clothes from the high priestess, and she went to the hot spring to wash her body after a long, hard day. Kuan Yue asked the maid to remember which of the 3 creams was applied to which area of the skin and at what time. The girl confirmed that she understood everything and would definitely remember everything, and began to apply the medicine to her mistress's body. Shi Tianrui watched the procedure from the roof of the high priestess's house and quietly complained that she was already using the ointment. The main character decided that he needed to buy some sleeping smoke, the kind that would knock him unconscious for the whole night. Shuaiden warned that the sleeping smoke costs 5 points. She cursed at how expensive it was, but there was nothing he could do. He would have to take it. The online assistant wrote off the points, and the official protagonist received the item he needed in his hand. Having finished with the water and medicinal procedures, Kuan Yue returned to her large and quite comfortable house. Shi Tianrui followed her carefully, trying not to be seen by her numerous and loyal guard of dog girls. The offended protagonist threw a pipe filled with sleeping smoke through the window in order to knock out all the inhabitants of the house. Inhaling the poisoned air, the high priestess fell to her knees, her body trembling. She felt herself losing consciousness. The high priestess tried to overcome the strange numbness that had suddenly taken hold of her entire body, but she was unsuccessful. Shi Tianrui watched her from the window. Finally seeing that the mistress of the house had passed out, it was time to act. He carefully opened the door and entered Kuan Yue's room. Now, he no longer had to fear the priestess's armed guards. The official protagonist laughed and declared that Li Yuanyi's perfect mission would end tonight. He looked at the lying Yui and decided to smear the areas of her back that had been treated with putrefactive liquid to cause infection. Tomorrow, she will wake up and in a rage will unleash all the dogs on Yuanyi. And then, look, with her hands, she will send this extra to the next world. But then Li Yuanyi grabbed Shi's hand and said, "The plan is, of course, as reliable as a Swiss watch, but caution wouldn't hurt."